Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is indeed the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right this morning, wherever you are. Let's take this out of the frame. Wherever you are, if you're under the sound of this voice, you have my appreciation for being under the sound of this voice, wherever you are in the world. I know there are people not just in the US, there are people all across the planet. And so I'm not going to be a locational chauvinist. So I will say wherever you are in the world, but I will say good morning because this show is based out of the United States. That's it. I'm glad you guys can join me. Interesting news. So we've had a few things that have taken place. And what's today? Today is Friday, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday, November 21st. We are heading around to Thanksgiving. That is coming up very soon, at the very least for the people who are in the United States. I know they don't celebrate that in other countries, but we celebrate in the United States. It's one of my favorite holidays. So there is that. I would not be doing a show on Thanksgiving, just giving you a heads up in advance. Interesting news. So Donald Trump's 21 8-point, what I like to call a dead letter peace plan is out. I call it a dead letter peace plan because there are elements of that plan that is going nowhere. Now, that being said, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not necessarily a starting point for negotiations, as long as we understand a starting point. As I said, some of those things are non-starters. At the 8 o'clock hour before Garland comes on, I'm going to go through the tenets and the provisions of that plan and point out, let's say, grenades, parts of that plan that are just nonsense. The U.S., it is a weird bird, man. Like, in one sense, it seems to acknowledge by virtue of that plan, all right, Ukraine is lost. That sucks. But then it says, however, maybe we could put lipstick on this pig and make it not look so bad. And so we are going to, wink, nod, slip this plan to the Russians. Now, I don't even know if this has been slipped to the Russians yet. I mean, up to this point, I think they've slipped it to the Ukrainians. And Ukraine in the United Nations has effectively said no. In fact, don't take my word for it. This very attractive Ukrainian woman at the United Nations came out and gave the response, ostensibly from the Ukrainian government.
We received from the American side a draft plan. We outlined the fundamental principles that matter to our people. We agreed to work on the plan's provisions in a way that would bring about a just end of the war. In this context, allow me to make several critical points. First, while Ukraine stands ready to engage in meaningful negotiations to end this war, including at the leaders' level, our red lines are clear and unwavering. There will never be any recognition, formal or otherwise, of Ukrainian territory temporarily occupied by the Russian Federation as Russian. Our land is not for sale. Ukraine will not accept any limits on its right to self-defense or on the size and capabilities of our armed forces. Nor will we tolerate any infringement on our sovereignty, including our sovereign right to choose the alliances we want to join. Any genuine peace process must respect a fundamental principle: nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, and nothing about Europe without Europe. And let me be equally clear, we will not reward the genocidal intent that underpins Russian aggression by undermining our identity, including our language. Second, support for Ukraine is indispensable. Peace requires strengthened security and sustained financial assistance to Ukraine. Reinforcing Ukraine's defense capabilities is not an escalation. It is the only path to compelling Russia to engage constructively in international peace efforts.
Okay, I'm not going to play the entirety of this clip. I did want to get those two parts in. Basically, hell no. We're not giving up squat. There's that. And then two, give us money. Give us money. So no, we're not going to accept this. And B, give us money. We need cash. Giving us cash is the way to end this war. Now, that is pretty astonishing considering the corruption scandal that is effectively rocking the Ukrainian political leadership. You've been embezzling money left and right. The $100 million is pittance. It's a pittance. Think of it for the moment. Now, Ukraine was often and fully understood to be, if not the most corrupt country on the planet, one of the most corrupt countries on the planet. And NABU, an organization, SEPO, an organization that was supposed to be ostensibly there to find corruption, has blinders on for 3 years. And then out the blue is like, hey, there's $100 million that we found. Dude, they have been cycling hundreds of billions of dollars through Ukraine. And the best that this organization, the bloodhound that it is, that it's supposed to be looking for corruption, $100 million. This is small change. It's a pittance. It's nothing in comparison to the larger schemes that have been taking place in Ukraine. I hope you get my point. Meaning, this idea that you were saying, we are not going to do squat. We don't accept your terms, Donald Trump. F you, Trump. F you. We don't accept your terms. And also, give us money. That's almost comical if it wasn't for a million people being dead, right? Few things. One, if you would have accepted the Minsk agreements, you wouldn't be losing your land. There's that. Two, you're $50 billion in the hole, and that would only get worse. And you are trying to push Europe to steal Russian money in order to fill a budget shortfall. And even if you could fill that budget shortfall, you're losing territory, hand over fist. You're losing territories over the course of within like 24 hours. Russia just came out and said Kupyansk has been liberated. So put it in context, right? So there's that part. You have no capacity to stop the Russian military. None. If Russia had genocidal intent, Ukraine would look like Gaza right now. The fact that it doesn't look like Gaza, meaning their intent was not genocidal. They may be getting to be more of a hard ass, but genocidal intent is a completely different matter. And we can see what that looks like by effectively looking across the other part of the world into Gaza. You don't seem to have a pot to piss in or a window to pitch it out of. And yet you're standing there striding, screaming about red lines. Okay. Fair enough. Now, converse to that, or let's say juxtapose against that, you have Putin, who you know shit gets real when he is in his military outfit, and he goes strutting, speaking to General Gerasimov. And immediately after Donald Trump puts out this 28-point peace plan, Putin comes out and they announce, Kupyansk has been liberated. And he tells them
in full, as we're going to discuss. I'm sure, confident that all the things that we've spoken before and the things that we're going to discuss today in private, I'm sure that all of that will be carried out in full as we've agreed. And so, like I said, we need to do this to achieve all the goals of the special military operation in your parts, in your areas of responsibility. Yes, Comrade Supreme Commander-in-Chief, all the goals will be accomplished. I'm sure
all of the goals of the special military operation will be accomplished. Period. Now, of course, the Russians always say we're open to negotiations. We're open to having a conversation, providing our terms are met. And the things that initiated this war in the very first place are addressed. Defiant, confident, whereas one side is screaming about red lines, budget shortfalls, military personnel desertions, being in the middle of cauldrons, political turmoil and political chaos. Putin is sitting there with a rock solid 80% rating, give or take. Their military are accomplishing their objectives. They're not having budget shortfalls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I hope you get my point. These are two radically different pictures. One country is completely and entirely dependent and reliant upon other countries in order to continue the military operation. The other country is not. So, look, I appreciate her point of view. I appreciate her point of view. She doesn't have to accept anything. Ukraine doesn't have to accept anything. They could just collapse on the battlefield. That is always an option. And as he points out, the objectives of the special military operation are going to be accomplished, whether that takes place on a negotiating table or whether that takes place on the battlefield. There's that. Trump's plan, as I pointed out, is a starting point. This is not like, there are elements of this plan that are just flat out no's. It doesn't seem like the U.S. it's still not accepting that a loss is a loss and that the loser doesn't get to dictate terms. Look, man, the idea, there's a part in the plan that points out and says something to the effect of some of the Russian money, like $100 billion of the Russian assets that are stolen, are going to be used. And apparently Europe is supposed to also give up $100 billion. And these are going to be used for joint projects. Why would they agree to that? Why would they agree to that? The United States overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014. Meaning, if you're looking for the thing that kickstarted all of this off, it's that. So why should you get some kind of business contract and some kind of business deal after you initiated a war that got over 1 million people killed? It's outrageous, just completely outrageous. I don't doubt that Dmitry Kirillov were having conversations with Witkoff, but I think that's a sideshow. There may be a back channel, fair enough, but obviously that's not going to be the end all be all in regards to the conversation. But my man is here. I want to bring him on. Disagreement with the toddler. That's funny. Laith Marouf. How you doing, Laith? You doing okay this morning? Or this afternoon for you?
Yeah, it's 2:15 p.m.
Yeah.
Drinking some mate.
Oh, ain't nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm glad you could join me, man. Laith Marouf, award-winning multimedia producer, media policy law consultant, focused on issues of liberation and decolonization from indigenous nations to Arab peoples, and building broadcasting capabilities for the misrepresented and underrepresented communities around the world. You can follow Laith on Free Palestine TV, or that's on Twitter, or freepalestine.video. Laith, I'm glad that you could join me. I would be remiss if the first thing I didn't bring up is the UN Security Council vote on this idea of a, quote, stabilization force, unquote. And apparently they have already started staffing the non-military elements of that, what is it, the Board of Peace? God, man, I hate the propaganda associated with this stuff. This is anything but. This is effectively codifying a genocide by other means. Give me your take on that vote and whether that vote is going to have, and maybe the way to ask this question is the significance of that vote and the significance of what it would mean on the ground. Maybe that's the way to ask this question.
Well, the significance of that vote for the United Nations and the international law system and structures that were built after World War II is that this was the nail in the coffin. Meaning, we've seen over the last 2 years all those laws and mechanisms created after World War II fail to actually stop a genocide from happening. And not only that, we are now seeing, as you mentioned, those words that you used, I think are important, codification of genocide into the United Nations structure. Now we have a return basically to the status of World War One. There is no more international law that was written after World War II, and we have direct mandate given by the League of Nations to the Americans and the British and all of their components of the empire to govern a colonized people and to deny them self-representation and to kill them if they resist. Because this is part of what's happening here. It's not only that there will be a UN so and so force that is going to be governing Gaza. No, this is a force to demilitarize the Palestinian people and to defeat the resistance. So this is the significant for the United Nations and international law. There's none existing anymore. The other thing that we saw here at the United Nations is the continuation of the glorious October 7th action, decolonization event, the continuation of how that event has exposed all true power structures around the globe. And, bare naked all these power structures and the talk about democracy, right to representation, whatever that we saw, freedom of speech, rights of journalists, rights of medical staff, that we saw the West being exposed over those 2 years, and now how the citizens of imperial domains have recognized that they have none of those rights. Well, we also just saw finally, with the abstention of both Russia and China, we saw finally also the truth about multipolarity and multipolar world and the BRICS and what have you, that this is not true multipolarity, that they will actually, the Russians and the Chinese state will abandon any and all peoples that are, living genocide and or fighting for their own liberation. If the West is going to come and beat you, they will not come and defend you. And in fact, they will sit back and do business as usual. This is what happened over the 2 years of the war in general, where China continued to trade with the Zionist colony, being its second largest trade partner. And even though that the resistance in Yemen gave an exception to Chinese ships when it was conducting the siege in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea, even then, those Chinese shipping companies continued to trade with the Zionist colony, didn't recognize the goodwill that was given by Yemen. And Russia, as we saw, and China are refusing to sell their most advanced weapons to any component of the axis of resistance, and voted to continue a siege on Yemen just a day before, abstaining from allowing this colonial force to take hold of Gaza. So these are like, in terms of the wider picture, in terms of what's happening in Gaza, the Palestinian people have resisted for 100 years every occupation, have resisted every Arabic collaborationist regime, and have survived for this 100 years. The Palestinian people, without the help of China or Russia, being isolated in an extermination camp that's besieged from all sides, were able to hold the whole imperial power to a standstill for 2 years. And the West has used all its power anyways. There has always been American Special Forces, Canadian Special Forces, German Special Forces, all the mercenary forces that we saw with like the GHF and others, and Emirati special forces and mercenaries of ISIS that were used openly in Gaza. We saw those gangs that were trying to, kill people whenever they go to get aid. So, militarily speaking, there's nothing that's going to change. What is the West going to do? Use a nuclear weapon on Gaza? They've used 12 Hiroshima worth of weapons over Gaza, and they couldn't defeat it. What is it going to change? Nothing. This is all part of psychological warfare that the West conducted, and unfortunately China and Russia participated in, which is trying to tell the Arabic people once more over the last 2 years, as they have been told for the last 2 years, that we will kill you and rape you and colonize you and steal your land and steal your resources openly and brag about it, and we'll rub it in your face and you can do nothing about it. Even at the United Nations, Russia and China will abstain. So, as a Palestinian, as an Arab, I say, Toz, which means what? To my ass. Russia and China, and their veto or not. Toz, to my ass. All the Arab colonialist vassals. Toz to Israel and its masters in the White House or London, or if they are the masters of the White House in London. Toz, we will take you all on. Palestine and the resistance in Palestine has not only liberated itself and is still fighting, has liberated the whole world. And if the world wants to follow with us in this path of liberation, imagine I've been seeing all these people defending China and Russia over the last few days. And God, Lord, some of this stuff that is being written is so racist. So racist. The Arabs deserve it. You deserve it. You all are fighting each other's Arabs this, Arabs that. Can you imagine these same people, what they would say to African people? Blacks this, blacks that. To Latino people. Now when the US is gonna invade Venezuela, and I hope Venezuela does good and can resist, but imagine if they fail. These same people would be defending the fact that neither China or Russia came to the aid of Venezuela or gave it any weapons to fight. It was Iran that's giving it weapons to fight. What they would say, Latinos this, Latinos that. They deserve. Colonized peoples that have been resisting for 100 years, the Arabic peoples, giving the biggest sacrifices in this anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist struggle since 1942 and the end of the war. No one on this planet, no nation, other nation, has suffered and resisted for so long. I mean, there has practically been no invasions by the West on any other region than the Arabic and Muslim peoples since the end of the Soviet Union. And we're to blame for our failures. Let me tell you, I went on a rant there, but the resistance will continue, and we will succeed with or without anyone else's help.
Now, everyone, there's been deep anger over this. I'll put it that way. Put it mildly. There's been a lot of anger on this. What do you make of the argument that some people are making that, well, Russia and China were isolated, that for all intents and purposes, many of the, Arab governments, Algeria, basically many of the Muslim nations agreed with the plan, and Russia and China were the only oddball out. And because they were the oddball out, that for all intents and purposes, they felt like, A, this isn't going to work in the first place, and B, they don't want to be isolated. What do you make to that argument? Because that is one of the arguments that are being made by people who ostensibly, let's say, back Russia, but also hate the fact that Russia didn't use their veto. Meaning people who are not being racist, who are like, God, man, I hate the fact that Russia didn't veto this or China didn't veto this. By the same token, this is their rationale or their reason for doing so. What do you say to that?
Well, I guess all the peoples of the planet that are seeking revolution, liberation, self-rule, can expect not to have any Russian or Chinese support. Okay, this is it. I said, if it's an issue of selfishness, why should even then peoples care if Russia wins or not in the Ukraine? Other peoples. Why? Why should we feel affinity with the Russian people and try to help them? Why should that happen? Everybody for themselves. So we just stripped all this talk about anti-imperialism to zero. That's what he's saying. Imagine also if the Palestinian people and the whole axis of resistance that offered all this sacrifice. By the way, let's be very clear. Not only did Russia and China not veto the recolonization of Palestine, they also helped the fall of Syria. I mean, Russia specifically. Russia specifically allowed the Israelis to bombard the hell out of Syria whenever they wanted to, then allow the Syrian government to use even the air defenses that it paid for, the S-300s. And in the end, Russia sold Syria and handed it over to HTS, and is now going to have control of the biggest gas field in the whole Mediterranean that Syria had discovered in 2011 and hasn't been allowed to ever touch, okay, with Russia occupying even the coastline. So the thing is that in the midst of all of this war, with the people of Gaza, not only withstanding, and the whole axis of resistance in general withstanding, with all the losses, there was the whole empire was at the edge of collapse, of internal civil unrest, unseen. Dude, everybody recognizes in this planet that the October 7th and what has happened since are like markers in history. So in this midst, where China and Russia, without even going into war, without even handing in weapons, we don't even need the weapons of China and Russia, honest to God. You saw what we did without them. Without them. So all we needed is Russia and China not trading with the Zionist colony, not propping up the vassal regimes in the Gulf, and using some of their international weight. But no, they continued trading with Israel. They continued plotting against the axis of resistance, whether it's in Yemen with the continuation of the siege and or the fall of Syria, all of these things. And there's direct weapons. Most of those drones that the Israelis are flying have components from China, plus all those DJI drones that are flying all around every alley in Gaza, hunting human beings, right? China can used its rare metals just a couple of weeks ago against the United States. Imagine if it did it in the beginning of the genocide, just like that. They're like, okay, we're not trading with rare metals. We're not sending you the drone cameras and all of these things. What would have happened? We don't need their weapons. We don't need them to fight on our behalf or have a direct war. And there's another excuse that people are throwing out. Well, Israel threatened to use nukes, and that's why. Okay, that happened also in 1973 when the Syrian military reached the Sea of Galilee and liberated all the Golan. and the United States picked up the phone to Russia, Soviet Union, and told them, hey, the Israelis are going to use nukes. So what did the Soviet Union do? Cut all the supply of parts for all the machinery that both the Syrian and the Egyptian military had. And the tanks just, of course, had to stop. One little piece broken, you're done. So the United States and Israel can constantly threaten with the use of nukes, and Russia and China will constantly retreat. So why have nukes even? Why have nukes? If every time somebody threatens anyone that tries to liberate Palestine with nukes, you say, yeah, I'm not going to have nukes, and go ahead, kill them all without nukes. This is the response of Russia and China. So that's cowardice. Today, it is a cowardice. Why are people coming to defend a nuclear-powered superpower as China from its cowardice of making business with the Zionists in the midst of the genocide?
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that one. I mean, look, you and I have quibbled over the Russia role in Syria, but in regards to supporting, I compare it to, and I've had guests on the show, I've had guests leave the show, by the way, for that very specific point of kind of like, if this was Hitler and people were supplying parts, armaments, Hitler's largest trading partner is committed to genocide, people would take issue with it, right? Like, it would be very strange to be okay with that. And for some reason, that's not the case. China's, it's their second largest. It's their largest trading partner, with the exception of the European Union, if you take the European Union as an entire entity. But the European Union is made up of, 28, 30 countries? How many ever? China's just one. So no, I don't have I don't think there's an excuse for that. I agree with you on that one. I would say this, though, and this is not in defense. I consider these countries realists. Like, the Soviet Union had an ideology built into it. And so they were anti-imperialists to their core. I think Russia and China are anti-imperialists when it comes to themselves. Basically, we're anti-imperialists for us, not necessarily as an absolute. And until people are going to hit their head on that. Same thing with BRICS. It's like, we are anti-imperialists for us. People are going to hit their head on it over and over again if they have this idea that these countries are going to risk anything of themselves in the context of any of this stuff. I've just come to that conclusion. I mean, that sucks in regards to the conclusion to come to, but that's the conclusion to come to. So no.
This is where, either we say China is communist, and the height of communism is anti-imperialism, as the height of capitalism is imperialism. So if China is not anti-imperialist, then it is not communist. Okay, that's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, so we end that debate. Number two, let's take it as if they are just realist states and they want to take care of themselves. Well, we know on a global scale, China is the only economic competitor of the Western Empire, and Russia is the only military competitor. All right. So let's say China and Russia sit back, build themselves a wall, politically, meaning it doesn't have to be physical, and they just sit there and watch as everybody else gets beaten to hell and recolonized and genocided and their resources looted. At some point, already the empire has a higher, I think, percentage of control of resources in this world because of all the vassals that it controls. At some point, the United States doesn't even need to trade, or the empire ruled from DC, to trade with China or Russia, and doesn't even have to go to war with them, just blockade, because everything outside China and Russia is under control of the imperialists. Mm-hmm. what would happen to China and Russia in this realist positionality? Can they survive by themselves? And I've heard people like argue, yeah, they can survive by themselves, just alone. I mean, as if like Russian citizens can eat Chinese electronics and Chinese people can eat Russian oil and gas, as if they can eat and survive on that. See where the crazy part is? So it doesn't even make sense from a capitalist, realist point of view that Russia and China sit back and watch everybody else who still has some form of sovereignty be taken out completely by the imperialists.
I think they're looking at it as the empire is collapsing. And like, I give you an example. Ship production. Like one of the ideas is the U.S. losing its industrial capacity. Well, that's a real thing. The usage of the dollar. Well, that's a real thing. The death rate in the United States. Like you can get metric after metric after metric after metric, and all of these metrics indicate that there is a flaw in the logic in the way that the West and the U.S. operates. Meaning they may not be looking at it in the sense of if we don't do anything, then we'll get blocked off and walled off. I don't think that's the way they're looking at it. I understand your point that it's like, dude, if you continuously allow countries that are affiliated or at the very least have some kind of tacit association with you to be taken out, then ultimately you're going to be isolated and you're going to be left to your own devices. No, I do get the argument. I do get it. I don't know if that's the way they're looking at it, but
you know,
look,
that last, I'm glad you brought out that last argument there. If we go that path, then it's not only about realism, but ultimate selfishness.
Yeah.
So it's like as if saying China and Russia, they know that the US is screwing itself over with all these wars. They know that if the US goes into Gaza, it's going to have American dead soldiers. They know that if the US invades Venezuela, they're going to be stuck there for another 10 years. And in the meanwhile, we will rise and the whole empire will collapse. So that's so ultra selfish that you're fine with a Holocaust in Gaza. You're fine with the rape fields of Syria. You're fine with the destruction of Lebanon. You're fine with assassinations of leaders of the resistance in Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, Yemen, because you think in the end the West is going to lose. And you are not going to have to do anything about it as a Chinese or Russian state. You let the people that have the crazy stubbornness to resist colonialism die on your behalf and take down the empire in their path. I mean, all it takes really, as I'm repeating here to everybody, China and Russia didn't need to fight a war on behalf of anybody or even hand out weapons, which they should. But China and Russia had to stop trading the least of it with the Zionist colony and stop selling it weapons, period. That in itself would have made such a huge difference in the battle that we wouldn't be here talking about still the existence of the Zionist colony.
How do you, for the life of me, I don't have an answer for this.
Hey, Jamal, do like this in front of the camera because it's a little bit out of focus.
Oh, I'm getting blurry. I'm sorry. Thank you. Oh, what is it? This. That works. All right, hold on. I have a better way to do this. Give me 1 second. This. Come on. All right. There we are.
All right. That's good.
Much better. Thank you for that. For the life of me, I don't know how they plan to disarm Gaza, disarm Hamas, or any of the groups that are in Gaza. Like, meaning, it seems like this is a plan without a plan. So what is the expectation that they use Egypt, Turkey, Indonesia, and some of these other countries to do the job that Israel couldn't do militarily? I mean, Egypt has already said, we're not going to be your basically, we're not going to be used in lieu of the Israeli military in Gaza. How do they plan on disarming Gaza?
Yeah, no, I really don't know. They've done everything in their power over the last 2 years. So what's going to be different, and why is it going to be different with a military force that has a different patch? Especially that the Israelis, supposedly, according to Western dogma, are the elite of the elite in military and strategy and intelligence and technology and
don't forget the most
everything.
moral. Most
Yeah,
moral.
and the most
Don't
moral.
forget that one.
Yes,
Yeah.
and the best dancers and the best doctors and the best engineers and the best musicians and writers, everything, actors, journalists, everything. Oh, they're chosen people. Okay, so if the chosen people couldn't achieve it, how is it going to make a difference having some Indonesian military on the ground that all their experience is killing demonstrators or killing communists on behalf of the United States? They're not. There is no way they can perform better than the Zionists. So I think it's, again, we go back to, this is all part of psychological warfare, and that's the only thing left for the empire. The empire lost the military warfare, lost the propaganda warfare, and again and again over the last 6 months, we see the empire, the Zionist empire, resorting to psychological warfare, pretending they can do things, speaking in ways like, look, all the Arabs and Muslim states, they wanted this. So you can't be more Catholic than the Pope. Look at you, Palestinians, the Arabs and Muslims abandoned you. What do you mean? We know the Arab and Muslim people haven't abandoned Palestine. We know that the vassal states have always abandoned Palestine since day one. And unfortunately, over the last year, with the fall of Syria, there's no more capital, Arabic capital, that is not under American control, directly or indirectly.
Why was MBS in DC?
Sorry?
Why was MBS in Washington, DC?
Oh, MBS.
Yeah.
That's again part of this psychological warfare. Look, European empires, all now captured by the United States, have tried to mold the new Arab since the end of World War One. And
he's the new Arab. MBS is.
Exactly. Yeah. So they've, we saw them on the one hand, how the propaganda machine of Hollywood created this, Bedouin sheikh and oil sheikh, repetitive, put in all the media, and he's like womanizer and in the tent and all of this, bringing, by the way, this brings up the Epstein tent that MBS sent for him for these Orientalist orgies with pedophilia. But there was always in the way the Arabic peoples in Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Algeria, all of those people that have been the opposite of that look, and also educated and anti-imperialist, which we saw how in the 1970s and 80s all the media in the West played that Arab terrorist. That's like the Palestinians and the Libyans and so forth. So now that in the mind of the empire, they have really defeated Arabic unification movements and Syrian unification movements and the destruction of Syria and so forth, they think they can project this new Arab right now. They saw that horse parade and so forth, bringing MBS into the White House, that whole red carpet and thing. This is him being positioned as the new Arab, the leader of the Arabic people, now that all the Arabic capitals have been destroyed. Okay, so there's no competition for him, and therefore they're putting him forward, and it's hilarious how this propaganda, psychological warfare works.
Yeah, that's playing out. Yeah, I saw it. I mean, he is talking about $1 trillion worth of investment in the United States. Apparently, their economy is only like $1.1 trillion. So this seems to be somewhat of a farce. Donald Trump is giving him what is it called, non-NATO military alliance status. I mean, this is the same thing that they're giving to Qatar, right? Like the U.S. is effectively giving both a similar military defense status in this. What do you make of this? I mean, do you also consider this to be just a propaganda issue, or do you give any significance to this? Like, for example, some people have made the argument that this is Israel losing, let's say, weight in regards to the U.S. political economy, considering that this was something that Israel was, all things being equal, against. Or you don't buy that? You think this is nonsense?
Yeah, that's nonsense, definitely.
Yeah.
Look, people that know the history of the United States can remember what happened to the indigenous tribes in Oklahoma when the discovery of oil. There's the book and the film.
Yes.
You know, Killers of the what is it, Winter Moon, or Killers of the Spring Moon, or whatever, the Summer Moon. I don't remember. So basically, these elite in the countries that have oil, that the US came, and before them the British appointed these ruling families, are inbred drunkards, drug addicts. I mean, everybody saw his Twitch of MBS. You understand how it is. And they are surrounded by people that are controlling their money. Okay, and all the money of these vassals are actually in American banks. Okay, this is what's propping the economy. They're just sitting their money there. And the American government and American banks are just investing it as it's sitting there. That's their job, right? So when he comes and says, I'm giving you $1 trillion, it's already there. And the US is doing whatever it wants to with it anyways. And in fact, even these elites, they look filthy rich, yes? These Gulf elites. But that's because the population is so small that even the fact that the West is stealing 90% or more of the actual wealth of oil sale since 1940 till now, just this mere 10% that these vassal leaders of Gulf states are taking makes them look so rich. But the vast majority of the income from the sale of the oil is going to the big oil companies, and the majority of the money of these Gulf vassals are stationed in American banks, and the US is doing whatever it wants to with them all the time. This trillion thing is also another lie, because it doesn't snap. It's not. It's already been taken.
Last thing before I let you go, Lebanon. What is taking place on the ground currently in Lebanon?
Yeah, we just released a video last night, a report from the south of Lebanon. People can watch it on Free Palestine video or on our YouTube channel. We went, there was 6 attacks within one day in the south. The Zionists put out maps of locations they're going to hit, and basically where they're terrorizing the whole south of Lebanon. And it was all residential homes and businesses like coffee shops and so forth. And we filmed much of that. We were stationed near it, and we were able to film it as these attacks were happening. There was also an attack on Ain al-Hilwa Palestinian refugee camp in Saida in the south of Lebanon, the major city in the south, where the Zionists attacked an indoor gym, like soccer, football field, killing 16 youth. Yeah. So 16 youth that were playing soccer, football, whatever you want to call it, and tens of others injured in this sports complex inside the refugee camp. So, we can clearly see this was timed, by the way, with the vote at the UN. This attack on the Palestinian refugee camp here was the worst massacre that Israel has conducted in Lebanon since the quote-unquote ceasefire in December last year. And it is designed to tell the Palestinian people that they will not be allowed to support resistance or be part of resistance or have any safety anywhere in the region, not only inside Gaza, the extermination camp. And those attacks in the south of Lebanon on all of these villages are timed also with the upcoming unwritten deadline that the Zionists and the Americans have for the Lebanese government to disarm resistance in the country. And clearly, Hezbollah hasn't disarmed. Clearly, the Lebanese military and the Lebanese president do not want to have a civil war and do not think that disarming Hezbollah is the right thing to do right now. So either we will see an outright escalation of war in Lebanon over the next few weeks, or things are gonna have to change somehow, because this routine of attacking civilian targets and killing people here is not gonna last for long.
Do you think the part of the objective of it is to force Hezbollah to respond, to basically to try to provoke, to push, to try to get them to was not breaking the ceasefire. Israel's been breaking the ceasefire, but to get them to effectively respond to the fact that they're murdering civilians en masse?
Yeah, I think we can think about it again in terms of psychological warfare, because the Zionists haven't been able to defeat Hezbollah, and their empire hasn't been able to force the Lebanese government to do that job. HTS wasn't either qualified to do it. So what we see is that the Zionists are terrorizing the population, which will not have any military objectives, okay? And therefore, this is just mere psychological warfare against the population of Lebanon to tell them, look, yeah, I can't defeat Hezbollah, but you see, Hezbollah can't protect you. So why are they here? You see, this is the clear aim in terms of psychological warfare. It's to get the population of the resistance milieu to feel that either Hezbollah has to respond or it doesn't have a use. Okay, so it's just psychological warfare in the end.
What does the population think, by the way? I mean, obviously, the population doesn't want to be bombed, but what is the population's perspective of Hezbollah? Is there a split in the way that it operates, where you have more pro-West, and then others who are more into the resistance? I don't have a good sense of how, let's say, the political split in Lebanon functions.
Well, I'd say in terms of the Shia population, I would say 90-some-odd% of them are pro-resistance, armed military resistance, and they, belong to either Hezbollah or Amal parties. The latest surveys done of the Lebanese population as a whole shows close to 70% of the population is against the disarmament of Hezbollah, and with the resistance being there and support for Palestine. And even within the, let's say, most propagandized population in Lebanon, the Maronite population, there is now a majority that are against the disarmament of Hezbollah. So there is no real opposition, and no matter all of that destruction and all of this genocide and losses of people's livelihood and most important leaders of resistance, and that did not sway people away from the resistance. In fact, seeing what happened in Gaza and what's happening in Syria pushed more people to the camp of support of resistance.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I guess my thing is for the people who are not backing the resistance. I mean, what do they think that if they give up their weapons, that Israel is going to be like, hey, you giving up your weapons, so we're going to stop bombing, we're going to stop killing? Like, how do they? Yeah, Israel is not. It's about land. They want to steal territory. This is not about them giving up weapons. Giving up weapons just means to an end sport. I guess the last question I would ask on this before I let you go. From the standpoint of Hezbollah, when this deadline erodes, when this deadline is over with, your expectation is Israel is going to launch a war and Hezbollah is going to respond to the fact that Israel launched a war. But Hezbollah is not going to respond until that deadline is over with. Or am I getting this wrong?
Yeah, I think Hezbollah is not going to initiate a war because up until now, if we look at its strategy internally, because the Americans attempted to create an internal battle in Lebanon to destabilize Hezbollah,
right.
Then Hezbollah just sat back and let things play out, while also looking steadfast and not blinking, right? And this is what ended up happening is now that the internal battle is over. There's no, the prime minister, the only one that is really, supporting American or Israeli plans, is very isolated. He cannot actually implement any of what he wants. He doesn't have control of any security forces or the military. And he doesn't belong to any party. Therefore, he can't even mobilize party militias. Okay. So, so right now, Hezbollah needs to continue in this way where it's showing that it is the reasonable actor. It is the most logical one. And, if they attack themselves, the Israelis, it may be that the propaganda will be played that, look, Hezbollah started another war, right? So if they are going to wait, they're going to wait for that reason. They're going to wait to see the war start and then say, we are defending Lebanon. Okay, we're not triggering a war. We are defending Lebanon from an invasion. We're liberating land and defending it. So this is why I think, Hezbollah will not trigger a war before this end of this deadline because it doesn't need to, actually. All the Israelis are doing is killing innocent civilians. It's not changing facts on the ground, military facts in the country.
Laith, always appreciate you, man. Always. Laith Marouf, he's an award-winning multimedia producer and policy law consultant. You can follow Laith on Free Palestine TV or freepalestine.video. Laith, by the way, you said you have another one that's just coming out. This one is basically documenting what has been taking place in regards to the bombings that Israel has been doing over the past couple of days.
Yes. We just released last night this video about what's happening over the last 2 days. We have another documentary that's coming up about all the incursions, or a little bit of, stealing of land that the Israelis are doing on the border with Lebanon, expanding some of their bases into territory that is, by international law, Lebanese. That took us a while to film because we had to go to the whole border. It's going to come out in 2 parts this week, so look out for that. And we have the series that we filmed in Greece. We released the first one a few days ago, and we're releasing another one this week. So look for those. There's going to be 9 in total documentaries from Greece about resistance history there and relationships with Palestine. And if people can donate, we're trying to go to Italy to do the same. And we hope to be going around the world to every location we can to film about history of anti-imperialism, decolonization struggles in those places that we visit and their relationship to Palestine.
Badass, man. Badass. Laith Marouf, you have a good one, man. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for this, Laith.
Thank you, Jamal. See you next week.
Have a good one. Bye-bye. Shout out to Laith. Shout out to Laith. Yeah, shout out to Laith. All right. Garland is going to be on the show in about 20, 30 minutes, give or take. He has been on a trip, which is why he wasn't here last week. He is back. I would imagine, hopefully well rested. It wasn't a vacation, but it was a damn good trip from my point of view that he was on. So hopefully he made it back safely without any issues. What I want to hit and what I want to go into is this 28-point proposal that Donald Trump has effectively put out. Losers don't get to dictate terms. And I guess there are two ways, and I guess there's a few ways to look at this. Gilbert Doctorow put out a post where he was like, yeah, people on both sides are going to be attacking this plan, but he said, bravo, he thought it was good. I think, though, that he may have thought it was good just because of what it means, not because of what is in the plan itself, if that makes sense. Meaning, if you go back and you listen to what J.D. Vance said in the very beginning, Vance was like, well, the Russians believe that the situation on the ground is better for them than it actually is. And so, nothing can really get accomplished because of that. This is going with the model that this is some kind of stalemate, right? Well, it's a stalemate. It's a stalemate. Stalemate became the new, little black dress. Everybody was effectively using it as opposed to Ukraine is getting crushed. Okay. New day. You can't play the stalemate card. The New York Times can't even play the stalemate card at this point. It looks bad. They are getting routed. And when you get several locations that fall seemingly back to back to back to back, this fighting in Servets, Kupyansk has been liberated. Cross is surrounded. Leningrad? That is being mopping up operations. And what you're going to end up with is the Russians taking Donbass. Meaning, regardless of any negotiations that is effectively taking place, is irrelevant to the point that as the campaign continues, within a few months, they would have liberated all of Donbass. So put that in context, right? And for the longest time, this was able to be denied. This cannot be denied today. It's impossible. And beyond being impossible to deny, well, maybe they can try to, but the reality of it is on the ground. It's obvious, and it's been obvious for a very long time. Not to mention the energy war. This attacks where Russia has effectively decimated the energy grid of Ukraine, where they will be getting energy apparently from Greece. Ask me a question. Where does Greece get its energy from? More than 50% comes from Russia. So there's that. Meaning, they are being taken apart. The number of desertions, the number of people who are being killed, dragging people off of the streets, and the high profile look of how bad it looks to drag a pizza guy or a guy walking his dog or a woman fighting one of these goons in order to prevent them from taking their husband or her kid. That looks horrendous. Angelina Jolie's bodyguard being snatched. All of that looks utterly horrendous. And so, A, the majority of your population says they want to enter the war. Even if they need to give up territory, they want to enter the war. There's that. B, you're getting routed. You're getting routed. C, there is a corruption scandal that is effectively rocking the political environment currently in Ukraine right now. Whereas it seems that there's a play being made for Zelensky. D, you're $50 billion in the hole. Meaning there are a litany of reasons that you can go down. Any one of them will be catastrophic. All of them putting together is just an utter and complete crisis. So, in the context of Zelensky and in the context of this idea of the political crisis, there was a huge amount of conversation that they were going to get rid of Yermak. Apparently, that is not going to take place. There's reporting that Yermak basically made the point that he would bring the whole house of cards down if indeed you try to get rid of him. And what they decided to do was to blame the Russians for the corruption scandal. I don't know how you do that, but okay. To blame the Russians for the corruption scandal and blame the United States. Now, to be fair, it was unclear on who was going after Zelensky. If you remember when Mark was on the show on Monday, one of my main questions to Mark was, who's after Zelensky? Obviously, somebody's trying to take Zelensky's head. Who is that person trying to take Zelensky's head? Come to find out, it seems like it was the U.S. Meaning, it seems like the objective was to weaken Zelensky just enough, soften him up enough to make it look, let's say, horrendous for him, and to make it look horrendous for his government. And so when the U.S. comes up and say, hey, by the way, we have a deal. So not only are you getting righted on the battlefield, but we also have this deal that we want to, introduce. And we need you to take this deal because you're losing on the battlefield. Reuters reports it as Donald Trump is demanding that they accept the deal. Well, I showed you the clip of the Ukrainian representative in the United Nations effectively saying, yeah, no, we're not doing that. We're not giving up territory. And by the way, give us money. I don't know how both of those things work together, but okay, fair enough. That seems to be the way that she went with that. That being said, the deal may be a starting point. Now, Putin is confident, defiant. Anytime you see him in his military garb, shit has gotten real. And the day after Donald Trump puts out, or at the very least, the 28-point peace plan is released, Putin is in a military garb.
In private.
Having a conversation with his generals. Gerasimov comes out and says, we have liberated Kupyansk. And Putin tells them this.
I'm sure, confident that all the things that we've spoken before and the things that we're going to discuss today in private, I'm sure that all of that will be carried out in full as we've agreed. And so, like I said, we need to do this to achieve all the goals of the special military operation in your parts, in your areas of responsibility. Yes, Comrade Supreme Commander, achieve all the goals.
All of the goals in a special military operation will be achieved. Period. Period. So there's that. I want to go through the deal plan, quote unquote, that Donald Trump is effectively is releasing, that Witkoff and Kirillov have apparently worked out together. Let's go through some of this. Some of this is fine. Some of it just straight deal breakers. And it's the deal breakers that are the most interesting part. Ukraine's sovereignty will be confirmed. Okay. That one is funny to me because you start off saying that, and then some of the other provisions effectively undercut Ukraine's sovereignty. To be very clear, though, there were the Minsk agreements. Ukraine didn't have to lose any territory at all. If you remember, the Minsk agreements would have kept Lugansk and Donetsk under the auspices of the Ukrainian government. It just would have, right? But again, they didn't necessarily want to attune to those. And so this is where we end up, an overthrow of the government in Ukraine. This provokes a war. And 3 years later, this is where we are. For the longest time, the West have claimed that it was completely unprovoked, which was always nonsense. They can claim that the Ukrainians were winning, which was nonsense. And then they claim, when they couldn't claim they were winning, that it was a stalemate and it would be a stalemate forever. Okay, this was also nonsense. And the fact that this plan has come out is indicative of a realization dawning on the United States that Ukraine is failing miserably. And Donald Trump is going to look like an asshole if indeed, or if and when, the Ukrainian military collapses. Hence, a 28-point peace plan to put lipstick on a pig. Number one, Ukraine's sovereignty to be confirmed. Okay. A full and comprehensive non-aggression agreement will be concluded with Russia, Ukraine, and Europe. All ambiguities of the past 30 years will be considered resolved. That's vague, but okay. It is expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries and NATO will not expand further. All right. Again, that sounds good. How do you enshrine that into some kind of legal mechanism? Because if you're the Russians, you would probably want that first. Meaning this idea of trusting the United States and trusting the Europeans is off the table. This idea of, hey, let's get a ceasefire first, and then we'll talk about this other stuff later. It's not going to be the case. At least I don't buy it to be the case, but who knows? Let's keep going. A dialogue will be conducted between Russia and NATO, mediated by the United States, to resolve all security issues and create conditions for de-escalation, thereby ensuring global security and increasing opportunities for cooperation and future economic development. A dialogue will be conducted between Russia and NATO, mediated by the United States, to resolve all security issues and conditions for de-escalation. Now, again, this goes to the whole Russian thing where they said, look, we need to deal with create the causes of the war, first and foremost. Meaning, this idea of a ceasefire is nonsense. We need to deal with how this war started. And how this war started was the expansion of NATO. Full stop. Now, again, if you are asking them, look, my point of view, and I could be wrong on this, is that all notions of trust are off the table. They're off the table. Russia has no reason to trust the United States. You've had Minsk 1 and 2. You've had the Istanbul agreements where Boris Johnson comes in and effectively gets rid of the agreement. And so you've had multiple opportunities to either not start a conflict or to end it almost immediately under terms that would have been radically different than what these terms are. Every month that this goes, these terms will get worse. Now, this is Trump's plan. This is not the Russians' plan. But you can even get a sense of the trajectory of things just based on Trump's current plan, as opposed to the non-plan that he had prior. Meaning this plan, as flawed as it is a recognition of what is taking place on the ground militarily. Period. My argument has always been that Russia's chasing safety. That doesn't mean they're going to settle for anything. And trust is, I don't buy that trust is going to be a part of this process. But I could be wrong. Let's keep going. This is let's go to point number 5. Ukraine will receive reliable security guarantees. Okay, that's vague. That's vague. Security guarantees from who? From the United States? From Europe? Let's keep going. The size of Ukraine armed forces will be limited to 60,000 personnel. That's a non-starter. That's a non-starter. They are around 800,000 now, supposedly. I mean, take into account desertions, people dead, and those type of things. But supposedly around 800,000. So 200,000 less, and you think the Russians are going to accept that? They're denazifying Ukraine, and for that matter, cutting down the size of the Ukrainian military every day as we speak now. That 600,000 number is going to be a no-go. But again, starting point, right? Ukraine agrees to enshrine its constitution that it will not join NATO. NATO agrees to include in its statutes a provision that it will not accept Ukraine in the future. Okay. At one point, Ukraine being a neutral country was already supposedly enshrined in their constitution. They removed it. But that's equivalent. NATO agrees not to deploy troops in Ukraine. Okay. European fighter jets will be stationed in Poland. That may be a negotiation issue. Meaning, obviously, Poland is its own country, but Russia may take issue with it being that close to their border. U.S. guarantees the United States will receive compensation for the guarantee. If the Ukrainians invade Russia, it will lose guarantee. If Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to decisive coordinated military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated, recognition of new territories, and all other benefits of this deal will be revoked. If Ukraine, without cause, launches missiles at Moscow or St. Petersburg, the security guarantees will be considered invalid. Non-starter. Non-starter. Like, think about what we're saying here for the moment, right? Why on earth would you trust, look, good faith cannot be a part of this process, right? The United States will receive compensation for the guarantee. If Ukraine invades Russia, it will lose the guarantee. Okay. If Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to a decisive coordinated military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated, recognition of new territories, and all of the benefits of this deal will be revoked. That sounds like a recipe for a third world war. If you are effectively, that sounds like an Article 5 guarantee, right? It depends on what you mean by military response. And are you talking about a military response of NATO countries, of the United States, of Europe? Who is doing this coordinated military response? You're saying coordinated, so obviously it's more than one country that's involved. And then it's this other part. It says, if Ukraine, without cause, launches a missile at Moscow or St. Petersburg. What do you mean without cause? How do you trust that? What has been taking place over the past few days or the past few weeks? You've had drone incursions that they blamed on the Russians, if you remember. You've had missiles that have landed in Poland, or drones flying in Poland, in Poland, that they blamed on the Russians. You've had a train, it wasn't a derailment, but hijinks on a train that they claimed it was 2 Ukrainians, but those 2 Ukrainians who fled to Belarus were obviously put up by the Russians to do it. Meaning Europe has been instigating false flags left and right, continuously. So read this provision in that context. The United States will receive compensation for the guarantee. If Ukraine invades Russia, it would lose its guarantee. If Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to decisive coordinated military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated. Recognition of new territories and other benefits of this deal will be revoked. Dude, those territories are in Russian hands. You can't do anything about it one way or the other. They don't need your acknowledgement. Just to be clear, but let's keep going. If Ukraine, without cause, it's that part. If Ukraine, without cause, launches a missile at Moscow, St. Petersburg, the security guarantees will be considered invalid. Okay, what if they launch it at another location? What if they launch it at another location? But the issue is more so the without cause part. How are you trusting? For one, who are the guarantors of this? Right? Think back to the deal with Iran in regards to the JCPOA. The U.S. pulls out. Europe stands there with its thumb in its ass and attacks Iran. Okay, those were the guarantors. So how do you trust the guarantors in this situation when all of these things are effectively one? Why would Russia accept this notion that a false flag can be the thing that kicks off a third world war? And to have this kind of legal fig leaf as a mechanism by which it kicks off. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, though. But let's keep going. Ukraine retains the right to EU membership and will receive short-term preferential access to the European market while the issue is under consideration. Hey, man, I don't even know if the European Union wants Ukraine. So there's that. 2, I don't even know if Russia would be okay with that. I mean, for the longest time, this idea of the European Union and NATO have been almost hand in glove. I don't have an answer for that one. But I'll put an asterisk by it. A powerful global package of measures for reconstruction of Ukraine included, but not limited to, creation of a Ukraine Development Fund to invest in high-growth sectors, including technology, data processing centers, and artificial intelligence. The United States will cooperate with Ukraine on joint construction, development, modernization, and operation of Ukraine's gas infrastructure, including pipeline storage facilities. Joint efforts to restore war-affected territories, including the reconstruction and modernization of cities and residential areas, infrastructure development, extraction of minerals and natural resources, The World Bank would develop a special financing package to accelerate these efforts. So what, a loan? A loan? Is that what we're saying? And obviously the United States has a vested interest in this because of the shady dealing that the United States was making with, and for that matter, the UK was making with Ukraine. But let's keep going. Frozen assets will be used in the following way. 100 billion in stolen assets, Russian assets. I'm using the term stolen. They're saying frozen. I consider them stolen. If you break into my bank account and you take, I don't know, a few $1,000s out, and you say, well, I'm going to hold this for whatever reason I'm holding it for. And I'm going to hold this for, I don't know, a few years. You could use the term frozen. I'm going to use the term theft. You've stolen my assets. You've stolen my money. When cops stop people on the streets and they steal money belonging to Americans with very little cause, that's theft. You could say that the cop is holding the money. Many people don't get that money back, but for all intents and purposes, it's theft. I'm calling it theft because that's what it is. Frozen assets will be used in the following way. $100 billion of stolen Russian assets will be invested in U.S.-led reconstruction and investment efforts in Ukraine. And that's the other thing. How do you know that the Russians wanted to use that money in order to invest in Ukraine? Like, you are effectively saying, hey, this money that is frozen, we're now going to use 100 billion of it to invest in this country that you've been fighting with. Oh, and by the way, we overthrew that country in order to provoke a war. Okay. We'll be invested in U.S.-led reconstruction and investment efforts in Ukraine. That's the other thing, right? And so the U.S. wants to make a profit off of overthrowing the government of Ukraine and embroiling the country into a war. And it's like, yeah, we'll lead these efforts. We'll handle this for you. We'll take $100 billion of your money and we'll use it for investment efforts in Ukraine. The United States will receive 50% of the profits in this undertaking. So not only did we overthrow the government of Ukraine, not only did that government get crushed in the war that was provoked as a result of Europe and the United States provoking that war in Ukraine after the overthrow of the government of Ukraine, we now want to make a profit. We now want to make a profit with your stolen money. With your stolen money. Wow, that's amazing. That's some balls. The United States will take 50% of the profits of this undertaking. Europe will add another 100 billion to increase the total investment available for Ukraine's reconstruction. And now they're telling Europe to pony up more money. That's great. Frozen European assets will be unfrozen. The remaining frozen Russian assets will be invested in a separate American-Russian investment vehicle that will implement joint American-Russian projects in areas to be determined. So again, like how is this argument being made with a straight face? You provoke a war. You provoke a war. You freeze my money with every effort to steal that money. And the U.S. comes along and says, I have a plan. Why don't we take 100 billion of it and we invest it in the country that you've been fighting? And I get that we provoked the war and everything else. I get that. But just hear me out. We will lead the effort for investment in Ukraine. The Europeans will put up $100 billion. And the rest of the money, we will invest it in projects between the United States and Russia. Isn't that a great idea? You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. You steal my money, and then you come to me with some business scheme after you steal my money to invest it in something that I might not give a shit about. That's amazing. That is the balls. The balls. Just the sheer size and girth of the balls to even put that in writing is amazing. That is amazing. This fund will be aimed at strengthening bilateral relations and increasing shared interests in order to create strong motivation not to return to conflict. So I have to bribe you with money that you've stolen from me so we won't return to conflict. Dude, I've won this war. I've won this war. What part of this don't you understand? For fuck's sake. A joint Russian... like some of this stuff is just outrageous. let's keep going. A joint American-Russian working group on security issues will be established to facilitate and ensure the fulfillment of provisions of the agreement. Okay. Russia will legislatively enshrine a policy of non-aggression towards Europe and Ukraine. Well, they weren't trying to be aggressive towards them anyway. The United States and Russia will agree to extend validity of treaties on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons and arms control, including START 1. Ukraine agrees to remain a non-nuclear state in accordance with the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. The Zaporozhye nuclear power plant will be restarted under IAEA supervision, and the generated electricity will be split equally between Russia and Ukraine. You're out of your mind. You're out of your mind. If you think that, you're crazy. That nuclear power plant is part of Russia and will remain so. Period. I feel like I don't know where they get this stuff from. Period. That's not negotiable. Zaporozhye is one of the regions, right? Both countries undertake to introduce educational programs in schools and society that promote understanding of tolerance of different cultures and elimination of racism and prejudice. Ukraine will adopt EU rules on religious tolerance and protection of linguistic minorities. Both countries agree to lift all discriminatory measures and guarantee the rights of Ukrainian and Russian media and education. All Nazi ideology and activities must be rejected and prohibited. Dude, the Nazis in Ukraine, the Nazis aren't in Russia. I mean, you're acting like you're trying to both sides. This is not both sides. Territories: Crimea, Lugansk, Donetsk will be recognized as a de facto Russian, including by the United States. Kherson, Zaporozhye will be frozen along the lines of contact, which means de facto recognition along the line of contact. Russia renounces the territories, probably referring to parts of Kharkov, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk Oblast that it controls outside the 5 regions. Ukrainian forces will withdraw to parts of Donetsk Oblast that currently control. This withdrawal zone will be regarded as neutral demilitarization buffer zone and internationally recognized as territory belonging to the Russian Federation. Russian forces will not enter the demilitarized zone. After future territorial arrangements are agreed, both the Russian Federation and Ukraine undertake not to change these arrangements by force. Any security guarantees will not apply in event of violation of the commitment. Russia will not obstruct Ukraine's commercial use of the Dnieper River. The agreements will be reached on the free transportation of grain across the Black Sea. Skeptical of that one. A humanitarian committee will be created to resolve outstanding issues. All remaining prisoners and bodies will be exchanged. All civilian detainees and hostages will be returned, including children. A family reunification program will be implemented. Measures will be undertaken to alleviate the suffering of conflict victims. Ukraine will hold the elections 100 days when the agreement is signed. You know what that means? Bad Zelensky. All parties involved in the conflict will receive full amnesty for actions committed during war. I don't know if the Russians are going to accept that. This agreement will be legally binding. Its implementation will be monitored and guaranteed by a peace council presided by Trump. Fail. That's a fail. Ain't no way they're going to accept that. That lying, devious asshole, they're not going to accept one of the most... Garland, how you doing, man?
Fantastic. Great show as always. I was just watching watching our dear friend Laith Marouf.
Laith is intense. I don't blame him for being so, to be honest.
Oh yeah, love Laith. He's a lot. Look, you know me, I'm a very pro-Russian kind of guy, but there's a lot of things that he's saying I agree with. These things are complex. I understand that. So, we shall see how this turns out. But Laith is great. He's awesome.
Yeah, Laith is fantastic. Him and I have quibbled over his take on Russia in Syria. Him and I have totally quibbled over that in the past. But
hey, that's what makes this a good show. That's what makes this a good show. You know what I mean?
I don't think you.
That's the problem we have with CNN and MSNBC. You know what I mean? They bring on people that they're all singing the same note about whatever it is. And the great thing about alternative media is that we can quibble about things, that we can have disagreements, but that's like a dynamic conversation. That's a dynamic, you know what I mean? Where there's some level of disagreement. I love the ground that guy walks on. He is the salt of the earth. There's areas I disagree with him. There's areas I strongly agree with him, but that's why people tune into alternative media, because that's what they want. That's true. That's reality.
Well, the disagreement doesn't change my point of view, Laith. at all.
Exactly.
It's just disagreement, right? So, but no, man, I'm glad you could join me. Garland Nixon's political analyst, runs his YouTube channel, The Garland Nixon Show. You have just gotten back from a hell of a trip. Welcome back. There's that. You look well rested.
Yeah, feel great. I really didn't suffer much from
Like
jet lag, not at all.
How did you get that? I mean, we can tell the audience, correct? There's no issue.
Sure.
Okay. What did you go to? You went to an event in Moscow?
I went to so many events. I went to
Wow.
Moscow and I went with Scott Ritter, and there was a lot of stuff set up. I come to find out I'm some kind of a celebrity in Russia. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. You know, when like people in the street are walking up to take pictures with me. When Scott is like, I'll put it like this. I'd say, and it's been put like this. Scott is like Michael Jordan. There's nowhere he can go. They love the ground he walks, but he has a long history in Russia. They know who he is. You know, he was in there in the 80s, so he has such a long history, right? I'd be like maybe a John Stockton. Okay, I ain't Michael Jordan, but if you walk through the airport, people are like, I think that's John Stockton. Can I get a picture? Yeah, so I'm the John Stockton. I was a big John Stockton fan, I might add. But at any rate, so yeah, but I didn't know that. And so I did.
Wait a minute, John Stockton was with the
Jazz.
You know,
One of the great
Jazz,
point
right?
one of the great point guards of all time.
Yeah.
But at any rate, see, there you go. That's where you are. You had to say John Stockton was with who? Perfect. A perfect example.
Yeah.
You kind of know who he is, but there's a little hesitation.
Well, I used to play him. So the Jazz used to be one of the teams I used to play with. NBA, what is it called? NBA
2K or whatever.
Or whatever. Yeah, whatever that game is.
Yeah. Yes.
And so John Stockton was one of the guys. His 3-pointer was just on point.
So what we did, so you know, so what I did when I was there. So Scott had this thing called the Russia House or something that he does interviews with people over there, trying to get Americans, and it's done in both trying to get Americans to really see hear some people in Russia, and the Russians, and it's in both languages here. So you do a bunch of interviews. So I did those, but I did constant TV interviews every day. All these TV show programs. We went to RT. I was on Rick Sanchez's show. That was great. I went to the RT there. So I did a lot of TV interviews. In fact, Monday, Channel 1 is like the big TV, the biggest in Russia. They're going to do a 1-hour program. And we did that. I'm going to be on a 1-hour show on there. I did in St. Petersburg University. There was a forum. And they, set us up with all of these, brilliant academics, and they asked questions. And it was mostly asking me and Scott because they wanted to hear what Americans had to say, right? So we did these academic forums, all kind of interviews. He did interviews. Some of them I did on my own. So it was traveling around doing interviews with TV stations, with different colleges, with you name it, podcasts, like some of the biggest podcasts in Russia. I did interviews with that, some with Scott, some by myself. Then we did traveling around tours. The most awesome thing, really, I mean, there was so much, but one, because nobody goes there, is Minsk in Belarus. That place is unbelievable.
You were able to go to Minsk in Belarus?
I went to Minsk. It's unbelievable. Nice. Unbelievable. I never seen anything like it. The cleanest, most organized, most well-behaved society, you know what I mean, that you'll ever see in your life. This is going to sound weird, but I got to say this. I didn't see a fat person in the whole country. I did not see one.
I think Japan was the cleanest city I've ever seen.
Yeah.
They had no trash cans. It was
dude,
like
Moscow's clean. Moscow's clean. It is OCD clean. It's organized.
Did you get to go to
right?
The subways.
By the way, they don't have everything's like organic. They don't allow additives, they don't allow preservatives, they don't allow pesticides. So everything you eat is basically and drink is basically organic. The people are like healthy. They're like all happy, because the economy is great. It's a socialist country. They say we're a socialist country and our government doesn't allow this or that. They walk everywhere. So I mean, it's part of their culture. They have great trains and buses and all, but part of their culture is they walk. And they're literally like, yes, we're going to a museum. And we're like, oh, really? And they're like, well, we can either, take a car or a bus or whatever, or we can walk. And I'm like, well, how far is it? They're going, it's only like a 40-minute walk. I'm from America, dude. We ain't
Yeah.
doing 40-minute walks.
Yeah.
That's not how we do things.
Like, where's
I
the
go to
subway?
the gym and get on the treadmill. Yeah, but I ain't doing a 40-minute walk. But that's normal,
Especially
and
it's
that's
cold
why they.
there too, right?
Yeah,
Like
huh?
it's freezing there. It's
Yeah.
cold.
It's not as bad as Moscow. It's a little warmer.
Okay.
It's it's further south, whatever it is, but it's warmer than Moscow, so it's not as cold as Moscow or St. Petersburg.
Mhm.
So that's what I did. Traveled around, was beloved and welcomed by the people. The Russian people, the people in Belarus loved. They just literally hugged me.
What were
was
some
great.
of the questions that they were asking you? I'm very curious. I mean, because sometimes the questioning gives context to what the person is thinking. What were they like when they were probing you at these various interviews or these forums? What was the questions that I guess were most interesting that you were being hit with?
It's hard to say because every question you can think of, because we would do a forum on various things and it would be relative to the forum. So, anything, the stuff that you talk about on a day-to-day, relations between the United States and Russia. They asked about the Alaska summit. There was a lot of discussion of that. Did that mean anything? Did that change anything? What did I think? Because it would be like the Alaska summit. What do you think? Did that mean anything? Did you change anything? I'd say, well, symbolically, there were things that were important, and just I would give but they wanted just, in a way, they wanted to hear what Americans had to say. They don't get a chance to talk to Americans every day, and they want to hear what you have to say. Now, there's a lot of Americans in Moscow, a lot moved there, and they're very happy. You know what was interesting? Here's what's more interesting. Awesome place. I love Russia. Beautiful. Moscow's incredible. The people are friendly. No homeless people anywhere that I didn't see. It was clean. A little bit of, no crime. I mean, just a wonderful place, right? And I got back and I talked to people. Yeah, I got back from Russia. Did you get back safely? Oh my God. Like I was supposed to go into Moscow and there were thugs waiting on every corner to grab me, Putin people to beat me up. And I'm like, dude, I live near Baltimore. You go to East Baltimore, you got problems. I said, but Moscow, let's just say I felt a lot safer in Moscow than I do in East Baltimore, to say the least. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just the people in Russia are pretty well informed. The people in the United States have no clue. They think you're going to some deep, dark, evil place. And they're like, yes, are the people all scared of that Putin? Were they scared to talk? I'm like, oh, the people there kind of love the ground Putin walk on. They're like, there's pictures of him everywhere. They think he's the greatest leader since Catherine the Great. You know what I mean? They're like, what?
Yeah.
They like Putin? And I'm like, oh, God. So the Russian people are fairly well informed. The American people are propagandized to a level of ignorance that is astounding.
They don't hold the U.S. responsible for any of this stuff. Like, it doesn't fall to the Americans. It falls to the government, not to the Americans.
Let me give you something that's good. And they're smart people. They separate the government from the people. They're paying attention to politicians. Even they're looking at the whole Marjorie Taylor Greene and the MAGA thing. And they understand that there's a lot of MAGA people saying, hey, Trump, you promised us peace. You promised us you would resolve the Ukraine issue. You promised you would stop wars. So they understand that what the government's doing, the people don't. Well, so they're not pissed at the American people. Here's what's interesting. They like the American people. They know that over and all, the American people want peace. They know that their propaganda, they understand it better than most Americans. So they ain't mad at the American people at all. Now, the Europeans, they do not like the Europeans. They used to want to we're Europe, we want to integrate. And now it's like they hate us for racist reasons. They just want to do us in and do us war. And we're done with them. And we want to go east. We want to go in other directions. And their thing is this. We believe, based on the fact that there's a bunch of Americans saying we don't want war with Russia. We told our government to stop this crap. And we're mad at our government because they won't stop this. So their belief is, I think we can ultimately in the long run be friends with the American people. If the government of the American people would simply do what the American people want, we could be friends with the American people. Our problems are with these neocons, the same as a lot of Americans, right? So they're there. However, when it comes to the Europeans, they're irrational, they're hateful, and their leaders don't even look out for their own people. So how could we ever trust the ruling and political class in Europe, when they're screwing over their own people, they're impoverishing, they're doing stupid things that are hurting their own people. How can we ever trust these people? So their ire is far more towards Europe and not so much towards the United States. They see a possibility because there's an element of people in the United States that ultimately want peace. So that's what I got from them.
Yeah, I'm split in the way I feel about that.
Sure. I'm just telling you what I got from them.
No, I totally accept that. It's just looking at some of the polling, by the way, it backs that up, because the polling was coming out was saying like you had a much larger percentage of the Russians who changed their position in the way they were looking at Americans, as compared to the Europeans. And I remember looking at that poll like, God, be more cynical. Now, the reason I say, and the reason I have mixed feelings, obviously, I don't want to be at odds with anybody around the world. So there's that. So I like the fact that there's, among a population center, the populations are like, we don't want wars, right?
You're right.
So that I accept, and I appreciate that. By the same token, our leaders screw us over just as much, if not more so than the Europeans. And these guys are lunatics. I mean, even in that plan that Donald Trump put out, like there are elements of that plan that don't seem to recognize losers don't dictate terms. Now, this is a starting point, fair enough. But the U.S. knocked over the government of Ukraine. Like it was the West that decided not to go with the Istanbul agreements. It was meaning how much control or how much what's the word I'm looking for? Agency does Europe have in all of this process? And do they look at it as, well, the United States is somehow separate from Europe in the way that both countries are acting? Or they just look at it as, well, it seems that Trump wants to end the war. And because Trump wants to end the war, as compared to the Europeans who seem like lunatics, then at the very least, there's some hope for America. Is that the way they look at it?
I think here's the way I would put it. They're very politically sophisticated. So they don't say the United States. They do like we do every morning.
Right.
You've got this group, which is the neocons that want this. They understand you've got an element, say the Trump people, that may want some peace with Russia, but they want it on their terms. But we do understand that they want peace with Russia. That's a start, right? They understand that there's the liberal kind of Americans that are aligned with the European. So they're very politically sophisticated in the way that you and I watch your show on a daily basis, that you don't just say the Americans, that you understand that you have to parse who's fighting. What you do on a day-to-day basis is specifically that. You talk about this group of the neocons that want this, and then there's the Trump people that want that. And then even within MAGA, you got this group of MAGA that's pro-Israel, but they're dying out and they're getting overwhelmed by this group who's saying, well, we don't like it, what's going on. So what you and I do on a daily basis, which is really try to delve into the differences between who's who in America. The Russians are people are very politically sophisticated enough that they don't see America as a blob. They're doing the same thing. And that's what I think is good. Now, I will say one thing on the 28-point plan.
Yes.
2 parts. And that is, there are some areas in there that I'm like, if I'm the Russians, I say, that's exactly it. There's some things you look at that and you're saying, whoa, I didn't think I'd ever get that from the Americans. Okay.
Agreed.
There's some other things that you look at and say, that's a no, before we even start. Yeah, you know what I mean? Simple as that. You look at that, that's a no. No, we're not going to have like a council in charge of this and Trump runs the whole thing.
Right.
But,
like Trump
I would say this. Here's what I think about that. Remember when the Russians said before the Alaska summit, Witkoff gave them some kind of paper or something, and they said, now this is a starting point. I think this was it. Because the Russians are about professional diplomacy. And if you get that and you read that part on denazification and you say, that's the denazification that I'm talking about. Ooh, and you pick several things in there and you say, these are things that I never thought I'd get. You know what? This is a starting point. I can say, maybe at least if I can get this, this, and that, I ain't never going to give up this. So you go in a room and you negotiate and you see things that the Americans would never give up. And you say, okay, we can get these. And we ain't going to ever give up that. But at least we got to start. I think this is the document basically the Russians looked at when they said, This is a diplomatic starting point. Now we can talk. And that's all it is, as you and I know. It's a starting point. And there's areas they'll just never say yes to. But, okay, you can get going with this. However, here's the reality of this, and you know this as well as I do. The true question has nothing to do with that document. The true question is this. Is the United States willing to give Ukraine sovereignty? Here's what I mean. You want sovereignty? You got it, right? When Ukraine says, hey, everybody knows this. We got a document, reasonable start for diplomacy. There's some areas of absolutely no. There's some areas of absolute yes, right? Okay. When the Americans and the Russians look at that and they say, all right, we're willing to talk about this. And they say to Ukraine, it ain't a final document, but you got to say yes to negotiating on this document. We know Ukraine says, no, we're not going to give up. Everything's a red line. Zero, no, absolutely, forget it. The U.S. has to say, you want sovereignty? You got it. You got no more weapons. You got no more nothing. Goodbye. You want sovereignty so bad. Sovereignty means you don't get our money. Sovereignty means you don't get our intelligence. Sovereignty means you don't get our weapons. Sovereignty means you have sovereignty. Go fight the Russians. Oh, by the way, Europe? Yeah. Hey, look, man, it's a red line, dude. I understand where you're coming from. You're not willing to work with us. Yet you don't get our money. You don't get our intelligence. You don't get nothing. Look, you guys have decided you're going to stand up to the Russians and you don't have to listen to us. You want sovereignty. You got it. Adios. So my point is this. It comes down to this. In the past, when these things would happen, the United States, what would the U.S. say? Well, do this or we're going to walk away. That's what Trump would say. And the Europeans would say, no. And the Ukrainians would say, never. And the United States would say, all right, we ain't walking away.
Right. Okay.
We did this over and we played this game over and over. Do this or we'll walk away. No, we ain't doing it. And the U.S. would say, all right, we'll ship them some more missiles and continue to do this and this. The question has nothing to do with this. We already know the position of the Russians. We already know that the position of the Europeans. Before this happened, we didn't have to guess whether they were going to say absolutely not. The red lines, the Russians must be defeated at all costs.
Yes.
All the Americans, the question is not will they? Does the Trump team have the agency and authority to say, that's it? Okay, you're on your own with the Russians. We're walking away. Because if they do that, it's game, set, and match. And the Europeans know it. Now, the Trump team could use their leverage. They could also say to the Europeans, either you take it, or we're hitting you with 40%, 50%, 80% tariffs. Any number of things they could say to the Europeans. They got leverage over Europeans. They could say, if you do it, we'll destroy your economies. Do you really want to do that? But they ain't going to do that. Because let's be frank, Europe's a huge trading partner. And if we crush their economies, it's certainly going to hurt us, right? So I don't think they'll do that. But what they could do is say, look, we did everything we can. Go ahead and finish the Russians off by yourself. I mean, that's your red line. It ain't ours. You live with your red lines. And it would have the same effect. Because at that point, the Ukrainians would say, okay, Europe, give us the money. Europe would say, we don't have the money. Well, in that case, give us the weapons. And Europe would say, well, we don't have the weapons, but we do have red lines. Well, great. Fight them with your red lines. Red lines are theoretical. You can't fire a red line at the enemy. So you got your symbolic stance and your theoretical red line. See if you want to war with that. I kind of think artillery and drones will defeat symbolic red lines. So the issue becomes, isn't that the question? When the Nazis say no, which they will say, will the U.S. this time do something that they haven't done in the past? Say, we got to walk now. That's the only question to me. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Every word every syllable that came out of your mouth, I agree with. Because you're right? Like look, if Trump says, I'm out, you guys figure this out on your own. You're all horrible people. I'm leaving. What do? I mean, they've already said we can't afford to fund the war on our own. They've already said that they've been doing everything in their power to steal the Russian assets, the Russian money. Because they needed to fund the war. Euroclear has said, look, we will take you to court over this. Belgium has said, we're not doing this. And so what does Europe do? How does Europe maintain the war? And then when Europe turns to the U.S. and says, hey, we need to buy some weapons. And if Trump is like, no, you got to figure this out on your own. How do you maintain? Like, these guys are getting routed. They need those weapons now. And then Zelensky goes on a tour buying stuff that he doesn't have the money to pay for. It's like you're buying jets that are supposed to arrive in 2030. Dude, you're not going to be like, I don't even know if there will be in Ukraine.
At least he's consistent. He's buying jets that doesn't exist with money he doesn't have.
By the way, you talking about red lines. So the envoy for Ukraine was in the United Nations. And she comes out and she says, this is a no. She just says flat out, no. And she says, we have red lines. And she says, we're not giving up any territory. We're not doing that. And we need you to give us money. And you listen to the speech, you're like, are you serious right now? So you have hardcore red lines. You're being routed on the battlefield. You're in political turmoil at home, obviously, clearly at this point by the United States to weaken Zelensky as this plan was introduced. And as you point out, you have red lines. Okay.
You know what it would have been like? I've told people, my dad was a longshoreman. So you can imagine what kind of, dock worker. He was an old
hard man
tough guy, right?
Yeah.
I love my dad. He was a tough guy, to say the least, right? And it would be like my dad saying, okay, Garland, go cut the grass. Dad, number one, I ain't cutting the grass. Now give me my allowance.
Right. I'm not doing this, but give me money.
Went over well.
It's amazing. What do you make? I mean, so Reuters is claiming that Trump is demanding that they accept the deal. He's not asking, he's demanding. And I guess at this point, it becomes clear that the people who are trying to get rid of Zelensky is the U.S. effectively softening Zelensky up. I mean, give me your take on that. Is that what you think is taking place? Because beforehand, I wasn't sure who was going after him.
The bottom line is this. Whenever there's a threat, right? Here's the question. My background is law enforcement, right? So here's what I say. You make a rule, a law, a regulation. What is the enforcement mechanism?
Right.
Okay. So doesn't it get back to this? I think that's what I was saying earlier when I said, when you say you better take the deal, Europe and because they're really saying Europe and the Ukraine, you better take the deal. Right. You better take this deal. What is the enforcement mechanism? Because again, Dad, I'm not cutting the grass. Well, the question is, what is Dad going to do if I don't cut the grass? Am I going to get punished? Am I going to get hit over the head with a baseball bat? Am I going to get, whatever, no allowance for it? So what is the enforcement mechanism? There will be something, right? Okay, that's the bottom line. So again, doesn't it get back to that? When they say no to Trump in the past,
what does he do?
The two things would happen. Number one, Trump would, Trump. The administration would fold because the neocons were all over him. Even if they wanted to push, the neocons were like, no, we must continue to support them, right? So, and of course, like a child, if I said to Dad, I'm not going to cut the grass and I want my allowance, and he gave me my allowance anyway, why would I ever cut the grass again?
Yeah.
Because I already know that when he says, all right, Garland, I want you to go out and, whatever, I want you to go out and, clean all that trash. There's some trash blew in the backyard from these cars going by, clean that trash. No, and give me my allowance. If every time I say no, he gives my allowance, we have a consistent pattern. There is no enforcement mechanism. I won't do anything that he says until such time as he breaks that pattern. Okay. Then I'm going to be shocked. You're actually going to hold me to account here? Okay. So every single time, and what if every single time Dad said, all right, not only will I give your allowance, here's an extra $20. So he's actually, it benefits me to say no, because not only do I get my allowance, I get extra $20, right? Every single time the U.S. would say, we're walking away if you don't do this. The Europeans and the Nazis would say, no, we're not going to do it. Not only would we not do anything, Trump would then say, well, now we have to make the Russians come to the table. He would double down and say, now we're going to do this. So not only did they not hold him to account, he would then say, we have to double down on the Russians. And he'd threaten the Russians with something even more, tomahawks or whatever the case may be, bone-crushing sanctions, right? So it benefited them to say no, because it would drag the U.S. even more into it, right? So the question becomes, when they say no, does the Trump administration say this time we're walking away and we ain't coming back, and we're not going to join in to say we have to do something even more harsh to bring the Russians to account. The only issue is once they say no, what does the Trump team do? I'm not convinced what they're going to do. For all I know, it wouldn't shock me if it's the same. If they say, you got to do it, Ukraine says no. Europe, no. It wouldn't shock me if Trump says, all right, well, I guess we got to do bone crushing sanctions against all the Russians, which is absurd. Because think about this 500% tariffs. You know what that means? On people who buy oil from Russia, such as China. You just got to deal with China 3 weeks ago. And now you're going to say, you know what? We're going to do 500% tariffs on China again. And China's going to say, yeah, we just made a deal with those rare earths. And you ain't getting none of them again. And you did it. All that stuff is back on, and turn that soybean boat around and take it back. You know what I'm saying? So that's a bluff. They ain't doing 500% tariffs on nobody. That, Lindsey Graham, get out of here with that. It's absurd. They can't do it. It's a bluff. But what do we do, man? What do we do when they say no? We could read these and pretend like there's some possibility that the Ukrainians and the Europeans will say yes. No, they won't.
Well, Kalis has already said no.
Of course.
She's come out, gave a statement as like, this is unacceptable to us, which is amazing to me. Like somebody with no power from tiny Estonia, barely a military, if it exists at all. And it's like, no, we can't afford to pay for the war, but no, we're not going to do that. And then you get that other woman saying no as a UN envoy for Ukraine. We'll see. I mean, honestly, it would have been in their best interest to say yes. Because at the very least, you put pressure on the Russians. Saying no just makes it look like you're being intransigent. I agree with you, though. The question becomes, what does Donald Trump do? And let's be also honest. The reason this document exists is because Ukraine has been getting their ass kicked. And that pace has been accelerating. And Trump knows that pace has been accelerating. And it is very clear that Donbass, within a few months, will fall or be liberated, depending upon your point of view, in this case, regardless of what happens. And the humiliation that is going to fall on Trump himself, because at that point, it's his war.
And guess what?
That's the only reason this exists.
And guess what else? That's one of the reasons, to me, the Europeans can be so obstinate. And from their perspective, they're like, because Trump, it's obvious. The Biden people and the Brits, of course, but the Brits as in the shadow were behind it. So they were behind this thing to get it going, right? So they're like, well, the U.S. started this war. The U.S. supported it. The U.S. funded it. If it falls, we're going to blame it all on you anyway, Trump. So the Europeans are sitting there saying, well, we don't care if it loses. We're going to blame it on you, Trump. So why shouldn't we? It's a setup. Why do we ain't got to? You think they're worried about it?
That's such a good point.
News is we're ready to set up a government in absentia in Poland or wherever the hell, right?
Right.
And we'll just say, well, we've got the real government is in Warsaw, not in what they don't care. And then we'll say we would have won if it wasn't for Trump. So we're gonna blame it on you. We don't care. We got nothing to lose.
Oh, that is such a good point, Garland. Because they could just say, hey, we were willing to fight to the last dead Ukrainian. We were still willing to fight right now. God damn it, we were willing to put troops in Ukraine.
And we would have won.
Yeah. And we would have won. We would have taken back all the territory. We would have taken back Crimea. We would have done it all if it wasn't for that damn Trump.
So, to be frank, when Trump says it's not my war, we can make an argument, that sure, he did arm during his first thing. The U.S. government armed Ukraine during his first term. Whether he even knew it, I don't even know if he knew what the hell they were doing. He was wandering around, we're figuring out Russiagate. I don't know if he even knew at the time what was going on, but it happened under him. But this whole thing kicked off before he came in office. So I can make an argument that when he came into office, this was dumped in his lap. Yeah, but if somebody said, Garland, do you want to be the CEO of Coca-Cola? And I know Coca-Cola has a bunch of lawsuits against them. And I accept the job, then I accept liability as the CEO. I can't come in and take the job as CEO and somebody says, boy, Coca-Cola is being destroyed because of with these lawsuits. And Garland, how you can't save them. I can't say, well, these lawsuits were before me. I knew when I took the job as CEO of Coca-Cola that they were facing massive lawsuits, and that if I took that job, I was going to be responsible for getting them out of that mess. I didn't have to take that job. So I agree to some extent that some of this stuff fell in Trump's lap, but the liability is his. He didn't have to take the job as president. He wanted it. He took it. He assumes the liability for all of the problems that were there. That was his choice. So I can give him some leeway and say some of this crap was dumped in your lap, but hey, man, you didn't have to take president of the United States. You ran for it. You wanted it. And you took the liability for the issues. And it's up to you to clean them up or not. Or you go take the responsibility if they don't. Okay, but it's yours.
That's right. You're a billionaire. You could be in the beach on, in Portugal.
Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah,
I'd be,
or
if I had his
Mar-a-Lago,
money,
right?
if me and you had his money, they couldn't beg us to be president. We'd be living out our final days on the beach, doing whatever, smoking a Cuban cigar or whatever the case may be,
Portugal plants,
soaking up the
random
sun.
fish. Yeah. Garland, man, you are fantastic. Great breakdown as always. And I'm glad you're back, man. And I'm glad you made it back safely. And I'm glad you had a really good trip.
All right. And maybe I'll come back next week and I can talk more about, there's a lot of stuff I could talk about my trip, man. A lot of interesting things, that really interesting things that I could get into.
No, I want to hear it. I've never been. So it's always hearing what is it like on the ground is always fascinating to me in various locations, even when people are in other locations, other countries. So no, man, that's badass. Garland Nixon, political analyst, radio host. He runs the Garland Nixon show. When is your next show going to take place, by the way?
I'm going to do some stuff today. I'm going to have probably around 10:30. I usually on Fridays I have Jeremy Kuzmarov. I got to make sure he's going and he's good today at 10:30. And we do, he's with covertactionmagazine.com, and we always do what the CIA stuff's doing and intelligence related stuff. That's always fun.
Garland, you have a really good day, man. Thank you for this.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you later. Bye.
All right. I see my next guest in the background. I'm going to bring him in. Colonel Wilkerson. How you doing, man? You doing okay this morning?
I think so. Let me check my pulse.
Yeah. Hopefully you're doing well.
I'll be 81 in January.
Yeah, it is my
I never thought I'd make it past 70, so 11 years.
Really?
Yeah, getting more
my wedding
every day.
Well, I know during my marriage, I thought I was dying. So there's that. So I guess I can kind of get it. But 70, no, you're kicking, you're alive and well. Col Lawrence Wilkerson, he is former distinguished visiting professor of government and public policy at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. He taught 6 years at the University Honors Program at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He is also, and probably best known as retired United States Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff to United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. Thank you for joining me, man.
Good to be with you.
Well, obviously, the thing that's hit the news is the 28-point peace plan. That is the thing that people are effectively talking about. What has brought us to this point where an administration that initially went from tomahawks to ceasefire to now, okay, here's the 28-point plan. We need you to take it, and we demand that you take the plan according to Reuters. Anyway, give me your thoughts.
That's one of the questions of the hour, I think, if you're examining national security for America and the empire. I think I was wrong in there at a couple of places, and I think I can say that categorically because I've listened to Sergei Lavrov explain where I was wrong. And let me clarify that.
Yeah.
In Alaska, and I could go all the way back to Helsinki, really, in the first term, but in Alaska, more was accomplished, I think, than perhaps we critics initially thought. And when I say more, it was essentially an agreement between Putin and Trump that was, as anything could be with Trump, pretty firm. And I say that with guarded optimism, that not only was a ceasefire out of the question, but it was going to be complicated and difficult, and Europeans were going to throw rocks all the way down the road, and Ukraine too. But we needed a plan that would work. And then they established Budapest a little bit early. And so when Marco Rubio called and talked with Sergei Lavrov at length, and this is what I was really wrong about, Sergei explicated it for me, if you will, and I believe he's telling the truth. Most often he does. It was really a very positive phone call. It wasn't a brusque, typical Marco Rubio, go to hell, Sergei, I don't need to talk to you. It really was a fundamentally helpful telephone call. And they both realized that the United States in particular was not ready for such a complicated set of talks that would follow and that would happen in Budapest to make that series start. And this was going to cover everything from New START and renewal of it, and working on a new nuclear weapons treaty regime, which is very, very important. And it is important to Russia. and I think it's becoming important to the empire.
Hmm.
Not only that, they talked about really putting together something Trump hasn't done before. And his cabinet, apparently under Marco Rubio's guidance, I assume, as national security advisor, is working on this. Genuine working groups of experts, if there are any left in the U.S. government, who would work out the details like any summit would normally do. We've not done any of this. We've just had meetings, telephone calls, and then Trump goes his own way. And it's very frustrating for Putin. It's very frustrating for the Europeans. It's very frustrating for everybody in the world dealing with the empire. But this time, they apparently at least laid out a plan, and the 28-point plan, so to speak, codifies that at least initially. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to some productive talks, I hope, in Budapest.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, always trust is one of the issues associated with this. I would imagine there's probably none left from the Russian point of view. So some of the stuff will have to get done sooner rather than later, if any of it is accepted. There are obviously hard no's that are built into it, but this is the beginning of negotiations. From your point of view,
nothing's changed from the Russians' point of view. Nothing's changed. It's mostly changed on the other side. And it was changing all along. As Lavrov and Marco Rubio discussed, and Lavrov, I'm pretty sure he's accurate on this. He brought this up. The situation really was dicey because Trump went right and met with the Europeans and then seemed to change his mind from Alaska. But what Rubio did was assure Lavrov that no, it wasn't a change of mind. It was a tactical move to at least keep them at bay for the interim period, and that he wasn't about to sign up to the European plan, if you will, which is simply to keep the war going at all costs. Yeah. And that's across the board, and it's certainly the point in Brussels. So they had to deal with that, and that's kind of, I think, what derailed Budapest, because they weren't ready and hadn't started to deal with that yet. Now they've started to deal with it, at least I'm told they have. And what that deal is go to hell, Europeans. We're going to effect a peace agreement, and Donald Trump is going to get credit for it. And it's going to be his umpty-umph war that he has settled. And he's going to get the Peace Prize, all that garbage. But they are serious, I think, and they're serious in three very important ways. Zelensky doesn't matter anymore. He needs to get out of the way. And if he doesn't, someone will get him out of the way. Two, the Europeans are dead wrong, and they're going to fall apart politically anyway, so we can watch them fall apart and hope they don't turn into a 1930s Europe again, particularly Germany. And three, we need to do this because there are bigger issues by a quantum leap than Ukraine. And Ukraine is keeping us from these issues, not least of which is nuclear weapons. And we have a propensity in this particular conflict to even experiment with the use of those weapons. And that's not where we want to go, either of us, Moscow or Washington. And they're seized of the seriousness of this and the difficulties. And here's what I think is going to really take some work and maybe impossible. You get the situation stabilized momentarily. And maybe you can do that. And with Trump weighing in heavily on our side, we probably can do that. And basically, the confines or the limits or the map of that settlement is what Russia wants. And of course, not what some Ukrainians want, particularly the Nazis. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have a situation where some cessation of hostilities occurs. Major casualties stop being produced on both sides. You have exchanges of bodies and prisoners and all things associated with a reasonably good agreement, but the Nazis won't leave it alone. So they've been the fly in the ointment all along, and the United States in particular, but Europe in general, has been using them unconscionably, using these people who were Hitler acolytes, who persecuted the Jews in Poland, who did all manner of damnable things and will do them again, will not let this peace adhere. So you're going to have constant battles along the so-called line of peace, if you will, because these people will not let it rest. And that's one reason you need to get rid of Zelensky, because he's in their back pocket. with corruption and all the rest that they represent. And you need some kind of process set up that legitimizes a reasonably democratically elected leader of Ukraine, and who can then take over and bring some sort of pressure to bear on these people. It won't work completely, I guarantee, because these people are relentless. They are Ukraine's problem for centuries, and they're just in the personification of the Bandera gang a few years later. But they're the same people. They're the same people. They're the Jew-hating, anti-Semitic. Everybody in Europe is foul and criminal and stupid and dumb except us people. And they will not let this thing be a success if they can do anything about it. So that's going to be the long-term impediment to this agreement. Not the Russians, not the Ukrainians in general, but these Nazis. And all along, Putin has been right about these people. And all along, we have been exploiting them for our own reasons, basically making money off the war and bleeding Russia.
How much clout does Europe have in this process? Can the U.S. tell them to go to hell?
Less and less clout. Less and less. Merz is making a fool of himself with this going towards 5% of GDP. He's making the AfD the future of Germany and whatever coalition they can put together. Macron is a dead man walking, and Starmer's an idiot who has the lowest poll ratings in the history of Britain's Labour Party. So they aren't for long. You know what happened in the Netherlands? It's going to happen all across Europe. These rightist governments, that's what I'll call them, are going to be thrown out. And we just have to wait and hope the turmoil in the aftermath is not so great that it turns Europe around on its head, so to speak, and puts it back in the 1930s, not able to do anything in a unified fashion.
So the Europeans stomping their feet, it's not going to be, assuming for the moment that Donald Trump is being serious, because taco, right? The Europeans themselves are not an impediment to pushing this through if the United States throws its weight around in order to push this.
I missed what you said was the impediment.
Well, I'm asking is Europe, I guess the question I'm trying to frame it in the sense of, so the Europeans are not an impediment to if the U.S. decides to assert itself and try to
they are. They are. There's no question about that. There's still enough ammunition left in them, if you will, to be really harmful. But I think if we just plow ahead, and Trump is wont to do that once he gets the bull in his teeth or the whatever in his teeth. Yeah, I don't know what to say about him. He's such an awkward character. And I'm really worried now. I shouldn't say I'm worried. Maybe I'm ecstatic. The guy's got real physical problems and apparently mental problems too. And I'm hearing more and more about it from inside the White House. He's ill. Let's put it that way. I don't know how badly, but I don't think he's going to make it through the 4 years. And then the question becomes, was Tucker Carlson right when he advised, you ready for this? Maybe you've heard about it. Tucker Carlson advised Trump not to pick Marco Rubio as his vice president, but to pick Vance. And when he was asked why by Trump, Tucker Carlson said, because if you pick Marco Rubio, they'll assassinate you.
Yeah.
Think about that. Think about that. The ultra neoconservative, they'll assassinate you because they want the neoconservatives, they want Rubio in the Oval Office.
Well, that brings up another question, the blob, as some people call it. I mean, you were part of an administration. You could see how those things move, the military-industrial complex, in the words of Eisenhower. What effect does it have on presidential policy? Meaning, I get the president is a power in and of himself in regards to executive authority and everything else. But how much does the blob affect, let's say, how the president moves, what the president does, the levers or the leverage that they can use against the president?
Significantly, too much, significantly and too much. Because you take people like the Big Five or the Big Six, which include the largest warmongers and war merchants of death, I call them, in the world, top amongst which is Lockheed Martin. But then you've got what used to be Raytheon, now RTX. But every time I talk to anybody from RTX, they say, we're still Raytheon. but Lockheed took them under their wings, and they call them RTX. And Grumman and Boeing and all the rest of the characters, they swing a heavy weight with the Congress. And though we don't think this Congress swings a heavy weight with the president, in terms of the chairman of the effective committees, like the Senate Armed Services Committee and the House Armed Services Committee, and even the budget committees, correspond with the wishes of these people because they get huge amounts of donations from them. They're the open donations, and that's probably about 25% of the money they actually get because of all the black money that flows. But if you look online at the open donations given by defense contractors to the chairman of these critical committees, you'd be astounding. I mean, they're buying them. They're buying them just as surely as AIPAC buys them. And boy, do those interests sometimes coincide, because one of the things that Gaza is doing too, and Lebanon and Syria and Iran, one of the things it's doing is energizing these people to make even more money for their shareholders. If you've seen their shareholders' profits lately, especially Lockheed Martin, they're literally off the charts in terms of a business set up to do, fair and just business. They exploit their own stock prices by inflating them and buying back their stocks and so forth. And their shareholders are enjoying profits that are astronomical when you think about what should be the ups and downs of a capitalist society. They have no ups and downs. Ever since we went to war against Al-Qaeda, they have been making money at percentages that are just astounding. And so, yes, they have enormous influence even on the president because they give a lot of money to political campaigns other than Congress.
Wow. Okay. And Congress at that point exerts, let's say, leverage against the president in order to get the president to move a particular way. Basically, they attack the president to go after him. Oh, my God, he's giving up on Ukraine. Ukraine was going to win it if it wasn't for Donald Trump.
Yeah, look at Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham is a recipient of this kind of money. And he also, I think, has ideology that's just poisonous. But he is very much in favor of these defense contractors making even more because it fulfills his neoconservative agenda.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of this? I don't know if I'm going to call it an attempt to oust Zelensky, but definitely this political turmoil in Ukraine. I mean, some of it is a little bit ridiculous, kind of. I mean, if you think of Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries on the planet.
Yes.
And hundreds of billions of dollars have gone into Ukraine. Billions with a B. And the NABU, who's supposed to be looking out for corruption, is like, we found $100 million that was stolen. And it's like,
that's all you found?
Right. Right. It's like, that's all you found out of hundreds of billions of dollars that was coming into Ukraine. It's a bit funny, right?
Let me back up and tell you just how bad this is, Jamal. NATO, the alliance, had a stricter set of criteria for entry than the EU. Okay? Mm-hmm. It required everything from a political apparatus that was fundamentally liberally democratic and looking and feeling that way every day, and with the social institutions underneath it to prove it. It required anti-corruption policies that were hardcore and going after corruption with a vengeance. It required all manner of things. In fact, I once said to Colin Powell, if you had to follow this for entry into NATO, America wouldn't make it in. And he laughed, but he realized what I was saying. We waived all of that. We waived it for some of the biggest criminals in the world, in Albania, in Montenegro, and in Ukraine. We were getting ready to, and we were still a year ago, and certainly under Joe Biden, willing to waive it all just to get them in because we wanted to bleed Russia by doing that. That's how much we prostrated ourselves before our own demands and principles. We just threw them out the window. And we said, anybody in NATO who wants to come on, come all. If you're opposed to Russia, especially come now. Yep. And that's how we built this expansion of NATO into 31, 32 countries now. And not most of them, but many of them are foul as the night. And they're corrupt. And Ukraine is at the peak of that. In 2002, 3, 4, and 5, Powell put me literally in charge of the North Korean portfolio for him, and he put me into the Ukraine portfolio. We concluded in the best working group I've ever been a member of, the North Korean working group, that North Korea was a criminal state. And we defined that very carefully. Everybody in the interagency group was in that working group. Secret Service, FBI, all the intel agencies. And we concluded they were a criminal state. What were they doing? They were counterfeiting US $20 and $100 bills to the tune of $20 billion a year. They were counterfeiting US cigarettes to the tune of the California tax stamp. The New York tax stamp was on the cigarette package. It looked genuine, and they were flooding the United States with these cigarettes. Criminal state, we concluded. Their hard currency was gained through criminal activities. I was looking at Ukraine out of my other eye, so to speak. They were just as corrupt. They were just as corrupt. And now we're talking about them as being great Democrats and all this stuff. Bullshit. They're corrupt as hell. And what the Ukrainian people, God bless them, that have been suffering in this war and dying and being wounded in this war, are discovering now is just that fact. So Ukraine might be in a position to get rid of Zelensky, get its act together, and actually begin to become somewhat democratic. And first thing they got to do, of course, and you just named it, is get rid of this corruption, which is as bad as North Korea.
So is it your point of view that given that Donald Trump has put out this 28-point peace plan, that it's the United States that has effectively been, that has enabled NABU to go after the internal clique of Zelensky at this point? Basically, we need to weaken him in one sense internally and then put this deal out externally to try to force Ukraine to take the deal. Is that the way you're looking at it? Or
I don't
do you think
know. In that detail, I don't know if we're that savvy, that smart.
Okay.
But that would be a natural concomitant, if you will, of being forceful and wanting to put this deal in place with Putin and seeing Zelensky as an obstacle.
Interesting. Can we move to Israel for a bit? So what we're watching currently is the UN Security Council resolution for the stabilization force that has gone through.
Illegal.
Yeah. Break that down for us.
Violative of international law. What it does in essence, what is it? 2083 UNSCR 2083.
Something like that.
What it does in essence is it codifies officially under international aegis of the United Nations, colonial powers moving in under the brilliant leadership of Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, and Tony Blair to do what Israel was doing already, but to make it legal and a slightly slower process. That's what it does. I can't put it any more bluntly than that. We are internationalizing. We are blessing at the United Nations genocide.
Yeah, it's disturbing. People have been very angry that this has gone through. I mean, I guess the other question.
We had a counter over at the UN General Assembly, the United for Peace proposition that only required, well, I shouldn't say only, but I think it would have got a 2/3 vote. And then you would have a resolution out of the United Nations that was in accordance with international law, in accordance with international criminal law underneath that law, and would have been probably productive over time if it were adhered to, of a Palestinian state. This process now will not produce a Palestinian state. It'll just produce a slower, more demonic murder of the Palestinians.
How do they plan? I've asked this question to a few people and I haven't gotten an answer for it. So I'm going to ask you, how do they plan to disarm Hamas?
They aren't going to, and they don't plan to. They plan to try and kill them all. That's been Netanyahu's plan all along. Look at what he's doing now. He is not only violating 2 ceasefires simultaneously, he is doing it in a war-like fashion. He's back at war in Lebanon, and he's back at war in Gaza. And he's been at war and will stay at war in the West Bank. And we're just ignoring it. That's part of this perfidy, too. And part of the UN's irresponsibility, they're ignoring it as well. I take Antonio Guterres and put him in prison and throw away the key if I had the power.
Yeah.
And you know why Russia and China did not veto? They did not veto because they looked at it, both of them from their own perspective. which is a little bit different, but in general the same. The empire is committing suicide. Why should we abet that process? Why shouldn't we do everything in our power to speed it up? And they see this deal doing just that. And the coming war with Iran, Bibi has not forgotten about Iran. Haaretz this morning, Haaretz, big piece in there. We're still going to war with Iran. Yep, bingo, you got it, Haaretz.
How does this speed up the empire collapsing? Break that down for us.
Well, what's going to happen is we're going to get mired in Southwest Asia like we got mired in Afghanistan, Iraq, almost in Syria, almost in Libya and other places. But whoa, the degree to which we're mired is going to be absolutely imperially defeating. We're not going to come out of it. And when we do crawl out of it on our hands and knees 10 years after we've started it, we'll be broke. We'll be broken physically, we'll be broken morally, and we'll be broken as a nation. And they see that coming, both Beijing and Moscow. Why should they stop that? That's the way they feel now. Now, let me add, when I was in the State Department and we were working closely with China and closely with Sergei Lavrov in Russia and closely with other countries like Modi in India, but the leader before him, I forget his name now, and others, this wasn't the case. We were making mistakes. The Bush administration made mistakes, most vividly Iraq in 2003, which was a false war. It was an illegal war. But we were not making mistakes that were imperially defeating, that were going to bring us down. We are now on the cusp of two things, more than that, but two fundamental things that are going to destroy us. One is this prospect of going into Southwest Asia whole hog against Iran. And the second one, and that has nuclear dimensions too, Dimona, maybe even the Iranians, because I think they are smart enough now to be very close to a bomb. And the other thing is our physical situation. Even Richard Haas, my old boss at the State Department, head of the Council on Foreign Relations for a long time, now emeritus head of that, in Fortune magazine, in two different articles came out, and he's a little late, but he came out and he said, we are physically in trouble. We will be paying, we are paying now $1 trillion annually, yes, interest payments. We will be very shortly, maybe inside 5 years, paying $2 trillion. There will be no discretionary federal spending whatsoever. It'll all be going to service the debt. We are in huge physical trouble, much worse than in 1932 and 33. And we won't even recognize it, other than some people like us and those that are watching it very closely and understand what it's going to do. And why won't the financial community recognize it? Why won't the Fed recognize it? Why won't the Senate Banking Committee recognize it? Because they know if they recognize it, it will deepen and make more profound the financial crisis, because Americans will lose confidence immediately. And that's the worst possible thing to happen. But that's the trap we're in. We can't even admit the trap we're in, because it will become so bad, the American people will probably take to the streets and we'll have a freaking revolution in this country.
But they keep rolling. I mean, like, it's not like they're taking an inventory and saying, all right, we can't afford another war in the Middle East. We can't afford a war in Venezuela. We can't afford XYZ. That's not the way they're looking at it. No. I mean, they just seem to roll on.
We can't even afford, Jamal, to have that battle group off the coast of Venezuela. We can't. And this is crazy what we're doing. It's absolutely insane what we're doing. And I will give Trump credit. Not much, but I think he has a smell for this. After all, this is his forte, supposedly, money and more money. And I think he's trying to do some things to curtail it a bit, but it's like trying with a little fire extinguisher like I have in my kitchen to put out one of those Northwest Pacific fires. You can't do it.
I mean, Trump has exploded the deficit even further, though. I mean, the quote "big beautiful bill" is going to be obscene. Like I think under Biden, we were putting what $2 trillion on the deficit each year. That number is going to go.
I will say this: that the tariffs he imposed, however imperfectly and crazily, have gained quite a bit of money back.
Like
they've also raised
$100 billion.
They've raised prices and things like that too. But I mean, I don't think he realized just how bad the situation was, and that this would be a tempest in a teapot sort of solution. You know, it wouldn't really do much. But I do think he was trying to do something about it, or maybe some people around him were trying to do something about it. I wouldn't give it to Hegseth, Rubio, or the Secretary of the Treasury in that regard, but there might be some people around him, people from Project 2025, for example, who are evil people in my mind, but they are people who realize what dire straits we're in financially. Yeah. They're not doing a whole lot about it, except exacerbating it, but there are some people around the president who understand and aren't about to tell him, because they don't know how profound or deep his knowledge is, and I suspect it's about that deep. They're scared to tell him what the real truth is. And I think this reflection, this defense strategy that was going to come out, I can't find it now, that really is retrenchment, that sort of pulls in our forces from around the globe and saves maybe $75 to $100 billion a year just doing that. I think that's a reflection of it, but I don't even know that it's going to be published now.
Well, just to be clear, Netanyahu has, as you pointed out, continued the war in Gaza under the idea of a quote unquote ceasefire, continued the war in Lebanon under the idea of a ceasefire. He's been violating it the entire way through.
Every day.
Has been stealing more territory from Syria. I mean, he just got off the plane in Shades, apparently, to overlook the new area to which has been stolen in Syria. And you really believe that they're going to initiate this war against Iran? Like, so do you think the United States is going to be directly involved in that war? Meaning, obviously, Israel will be the initiator, because it wouldn't be Iran. I don't buy it for a moment that Iran would be the initiator. Up to this point, they've been pretty pragmatic.
Let me make 3 points. First, Iran thinks the war is coming. There is no one in Iran, in the leadership circle, security circle in particular, who doesn't think it's coming. That's the first point. And they're ready. The second point is Bibi is caught now. And this is one of the ways, the second point is one of the ways we might be able to extricate ourselves from this problem, at least temporarily. He's caught now and might just lose his job without having to be extracted for, primary reasons. He will just be extracted for political reasons. Now, that's not necessarily as positive as I might suggest, because who's going to replace him is probably going to be the same type of person, just lower key about it. Yeah. We still have polls, good polls, that tell us 80% of the Jewish citizens of Israel like what he's doing. And 50% or a little more, simple majority plus 2-3% of the Jewish citizens believe he should kill more and faster. So the problem isn't going away in that sense, but we could get Netanyahu going away, and that might arrest the momentum towards this conflict with Iran. As long as he's there, that is a sine qua non for his existence. He must eliminate Iran. He must eliminate Hezbollah too. So he's got 2 fronts, and then he's got the Gaza front, which Trump is now helping him with, and the UN too. He's got all those things to contend with, but those things are keeping him in office. So there's no way this isn't going to unroll, except, as I said, that they remove him, and then it'll just be a slower roll, because the new guy, gal, is not going to be much different from Netanyahu. You cannot stay in office if you differ with that 50 to 80% of Israeli Jews who think this is the right thing to do and have thought it all along.
But Israel took the worst beating of its existence in that 12-day war. And that's after activating all of these, let's say, assets that were on the ground.
That's another incentive to do it for Netanyahu. He doesn't like that happened. Yeah, he doesn't like that happened at all. And he feels rightfully, probably, and some of his military advisors whom he trusts feel this way too, that if they wait very much longer, it'll get worse.
Where's the air defense coming from?
Part of it is Russia, who has made it very clear in conversations with Bibi himself, and very clear to the Iranians, who were reluctant to get this bound to Russia, that they are bound to Moscow and that Moscow is going to support them to the hilt. And the Iranians are accepting that now because they understand the inevitability of the war that's coming. So you're not just fighting Iran, you're fighting Russia too. And that means pilots in the aircraft that Russia's giving them. That means Russian technicians on the ground orchestrating some of the very sophisticated air defense capability. And it probably means even more sophisticated missiles than Iran has. And Iran already has some very sophisticated missiles.
Yeah. I guess, actually, I was referring to Israeli air defense, but thank you for that, because it still explains it. But the United States, one of the Achilles heel that it has is this inability to provide air defense and the creation of that air defense. They're expensive. We don't manufacture a huge amount of them. No. Israel apparently ran through 20 years worth in 12 days, which is mind-blowing when you think about that. Yeah. That seems like an Achilles heel in any kind of military conflict if they're going to go after a country that is as military adept as Iran has shown itself to be.
It would be stunning to me if Netanyahu started it and Trump refused to follow. It would be stunning. I can't imagine Trump making that decision with Miriam Adelson hovering over his shoulder. But it is a remote possibility. I'm told that I can't verify this. The source is Israeli, but I can't verify this. I'm told that when the situation developed with Netanyahu wanting to violate diplomatic protocol and everything else in the world, international law, and attack Iran a day before the last negotiations were supposed to take place, if you remember, that Netanyahu threatened to use a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
With Trump. And that was the arbiter, if you will. Trump decided, well, yeah, I better come in with him. I better help him. And now we know Trump knew all about what was going to happen. I don't know if I believe that or not, but the source is pretty competent. And I think that might happen again. I think Bibi might say if he gets in extremis, which he will, if he attacks Iran again, he will say to Trump, I'm going to use a nuclear weapon or 2 or 3 or 4. And then what will Trump do? What will he do? Will he react conventionally against Iran in order to stave off the use of a nuclear weapon by Israel or multiple nuclear weapons by Israel? Or will he tell Bibi to go pound sand and let him rot and let him be destroyed? I don't know. That's a huge question. It is, I think, one of the questions of the hour in Southwest Asia. What will the United States do? Because we've got legislation. I don't know if you know this, but we passed legislation under Bill Clinton that says regime change in Iran is the law of the United States. It said Iran too, or it said Iraq also. That's what we used as justification, saying that Congress approved and everything, because we had that act passed. I think it was passed in '98. And it calls for regime change in both Iraq and Iran.
Right. This puts me in mind of there was a recent thing with Vladimir Putin. He was at a conference, and the Kazakhstan president, I don't know if you've seen this, the Kazakhstan president started, I guess, going into this kind of idealistic belief set of saying, yeah, I think countries could do without nukes and that they can just deal with economic issues. And Putin was like, that didn't help Iraq that much, did it? It just cut through it. Like that sounds good, but you have predators around this globe, and the nuclear weapon is it's the gun in this fight for all intents and purposes. Yeah, that's wow. That's amazing.
Colin Powell and I had this discussion in great depth. Mm-hmm. When we were taking down 30,000 warheads in Russia and 28,000 warheads in the U.S., as fast as we possibly could in the early 90s. We went from some 60,000 nuclear warheads down to roughly 10,000. And we were going to go down a lot further than that. We were going to go down to about 1,200 in Russia and about 1,200 in the United States.
Yeah.
I brought up the non-proliferation treaty, and I said, boss, you know, the ultimate purpose of the non-proliferation treaty, as is said in the treaty, and we're signatories, is zero. And he kind of smiled and he said, and we got in a battle with William Safire at the New York Times at the time because Powell said it and then said it publicly. You cannot disinvent nuclear weapons. And
yes,
Safire said that was not a word. And I went and got a copy of the Oxford English Dictionary with disinvent, sent it to Safire, and he sent Cola the box of champagne. But
yeah,
that's true.
It's true.
You can, as long as the technology exists. And so Powell's further argument was, we've got to have a few. We got to have a few as long as the technology exists, because we can't let somebody develop one out there and use it on us and not have a deterrent, because deterrence does work, he said. No one will shoot us if we have them, and we won't shoot anybody else if they have them. It's a very dangerous deterrence, but nonetheless, it is deterrence. And you can't disinvent them. It's a pretty persuasive argument. You know, we didn't resolve it in any significant way, but we were going to go down to, so I think the range was 1,200 to 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back and check the Moscow Treaty, which Colin sped off, he actually sent John Bolton, believe it or not, to Moscow to negotiate when we abrogated the ABM Treaty, and we didn't tell Russia anything about it except give them the notice and such. Powell dispatched Bolton, Undersecretary of State for International Security and Arms Control, and we created the Moscow Treaty. It was a 2-page treaty, and it took us on down to that level of 1,200 to 2,000, and we signed it in good faith. And then we went to hell. You know, we just forgot about it, and Russia saw what we were forgetting about and said, okay, well, you're going to get rid of the INF Treaty and all the rest of the things. We'll just start building weapons again. And that's how they got the Oreshnik and other missiles like that, because we took the treaty down. I mean, not that they wouldn't have had them hot on the, you know, the planning table, as it were. Mm-hmm. They would have had them, and so would we probably. Although they stole a march on us, I think. We did not pick up our leaving that treaty on immediately building those kinds of weapons. They did.
Yeah, chain of suspicion is rough. I mean, like, how do I know that you're being honest with me, that you don't have a nuke hiding somewhere that I'm unaware of? Like, it's that stuff.
Trust but verify. One of the few truisms Ronald Reagan said. Trust but verify. And we had verification regimes that were robust. The Russians in our country and us in their country. Ask Scott Ritter. He was there for a long time in Russia, verifying parts of the treaties.
The last thing I want to hit is Vietnam. I'm sorry, not Vietnam, Venezuela. We have apparently 20 to 25% of military assets in regards to the U.S. that is out in the Caribbean or near Venezuela at this point. We have been training in the jungles, apparently, of, I think it's like Puerto Rico or somewhere like that, but there's a military base in Puerto Rico that United States service members have been holding up and rehabilitating. But they've been training in jungles of the areas in South America that are close to Venezuela in preparation for potential assault on Venezuela. Donald Trump has been all over the place in regards to intentions on this. Initially, there was conversations with Maduro. Apparently, Rubio convinced Donald Trump that anything that Maduro would give, it would be better to just secure the country ourselves, as opposed to Maduro giving up oil or mineral wealth or whatever else that Maduro was willing to give. Donald Trump comes back later, says, yeah, I'm open to having conversations with him. It's like, but you've already had conversations and you weren't interested in what they were willing to give. Where do you think this falls? Do you think they're serious about this? Do you think this is a pressure campaign? Or do you think, no, this is a buildup for military intervention using a fig leaf of weapons of mass destruction, drug cartels as a way of going into Venezuela? Give me your thoughts on this.
Most of the intelligence that Trump is acting on is false intelligence. I would compare it with Ahmad Chalabi, curveball, Powell's presentation at the United Nations and other things like that with regard to Iraq. In other words, it's not good intelligence. But nonetheless, I'm told that Trump is acting on it because one of the people providing him with this intelligence is not Tulsi Gabbard, and certainly not that sycophant director of the CIA who has his head buried up Bibi Netanyahu's derriere.
Yeah.
It's Laura Loomer. She's giving him this intelligence.
Where is Loomer getting intelligence from? How is
it,
Loomer, that goofball, getting intel?
He's getting it from Gary Bernson, former CIA, who was after Al-Qaeda for us in Afghanistan. And some people say screwed up so badly that we sent him home. And he got out of the CIA, and he's now working with the opposition in Venezuela and a Jewish American citizen who is allied with him and plugged into Mossad. And frankly, I think you can't make this up, Jamal. Frankly, I think the newest Peace Prize winner, Machado, is also a Mossad agent. Take that in. Take that in. Israel is in Venezuela, commensurate with its size as opposed to ours, almost as deeply as we are, and has been there before Pompeo accepted the finding from Trump in his first term to destabilize by CIA direct action Venezuela. So this is an old thing that's been going on for a while. But your question is a very good one. Is Trump using this display of military power and so forth to get the maximum out of Maduro, and then he'll call it off? I don't know. That would be a smart strategy in some respects, although I think doing anything like this with regard to South America is really stupid. But if he wants all the things that we think he wants from Venezuela, it wouldn't be a bad strategy for getting it, because he scares the bejesus out of Maduro and the people around Maduro. Actually, what he's doing right now, I'm told from people in Caracas, he's solidifying the opposition on Maduro's side in large part because they don't think doing this to Venezuela is a good thing to be doing. And so they're taking Maduro's side. So you only have this limited group, Juan Guaido, Machado, people like that. That's all you have that really are for what Trump is doing inside Venezuela. So it's a dicey game to be playing, but maybe if it has that kind of outcome where Maduro says, okay, like Chavez eventually did, I'll sign a deal for oil. And I'm told he's already said that. He's already said that through the Colombian president, and he's already said it directly through his ambassador. So I don't know really what's going on, but I do know that if we go ahead with force of any kind, direct action by special operating forces or an effort to do a Noriega and snatch Maduro, or an all-out, conflict, it will be absolutely stupid and will rebound to our discredit, and we'll lose ultimately all the things that we want to gain from Venezuela. We'll lose them, and we'll be in an interminable war, much like Vietnam.
Because at that point, U.S. troops will be buried in Venezuela, a country that is massive. It's not a tiny country.
Yeah, compared to Panama, it's huge. It's huge. And it's got a significant population, and they will all go to the mountains, and they will fight us tooth and nail, just the way the Vietnamese did.
Where does Russia fit into this? Russia and China? I mean, both have a relationship with Venezuela. China's been getting oil.
Again?
Russia's been, yeah.
Yeah, again, though, they're sitting there saying the empire is killing itself. Why stop them?
Oh, that's so cynical. I don't doubt it. Look,
it's very out of Sun Tzu's book. Why take your enemy on if your enemy is killing himself?
I am a realist in the way that I think countries think. I think countries look out for their own interests first.
Yeah.
So I can't say you're wrong, but that is rough. That is cold-blooded. I mean, there have been some Russians that have come out as saying, look, we need to stand by our allies and those type of things. Do you think they would give them arms, weapons, munitions, those type of things in order to fight that war? I mean, some people have even put it up.
I think Russia, at least, has already given them to Venezuela. I'm not sure about China. China's a little more circumspect in that regard.
Yeah.
China's really not a photo of the empire. China is a very different country. Now, they have some ulterior motives, of course, like any country, and they have some ulterior motives that are not necessarily nice. They do want to take your money in any way, fashion, or form they can, and they want you to buy their electric cars, and they want you to buy their solar panels and so forth. And by the way, their electric cars and their solar panels are a hell of a lot better than ours.
Yes.
And cheaper. But they're not warlike in that regard. Tell me the last war China was in, 79 with Vietnam, and they got their rear end handed to them a little bit by the Vietnamese because they were battle hardened.
Yeah.
But they don't do war. Russia's a different matter altogether, as Ukraine is proving. But they have very astute people at the helm of their strategic approach to the world. We have idiots, and they're taking advantage of that.
So what is this about? Empire? Is that what this is about? Like, for all intents and purposes, the United States is trying to maintain primacy, tooth and nail, spitting and kicking and like putting their fingernails into it to try to maintain, despite the fact that the empire seems to be collapsing. Because all of this seems to be insane to me. Like $37 trillion in debt. And
I think Trump must be an agent of the devil. I mean, I have to say that about Biden too. But this leadership that we've had since 9/11, really, before that too, Bill Clinton did a lot of damage. But the leadership we've had since the turn of the century, let me just say that, has been really inadequate. And so grossly so that now the world is finally awakening. 70% of the world now hates our guts.
Yeah.
And the global South despises us. Look at COP30. COP30, China's there, and they are pouring things into the global South. Solar panels that reduce costs, electric cars, batteries, all manner of things China is pouring in. And I'll tell you this, it's winning friends and influencing enemies all over the global South. What are we doing? We didn't even send an E3, a private first class we did not send to COP30. We totally ignored it. China stole a march there that is huge. We will never recover the ground we lost there. And I put that at the feet of Donald Trump.
Well, they're doing the same in Africa. They're doing the same South America. Agreed. Colonel, you have my appreciation for this. Great breakdown, as always. Fantastic breakdown. I thank you for it. Col Lawrence Wilkerson. He is former distinguished visiting professor of government and public policy at College of William & Mary and Williamsburg, Virginia. Beautiful location, by the way. I lived in Richmond, or used to live in Richmond. He also taught, born and raised in Richmond, I'll say it that way. He also taught 6 years at the University Honors Program at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He is also, and probably best known as, retired United States Army Colonel and former Chief of Staff to United States Secretary of State Colin Powell. You have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for this.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye. All right, great breakdown by Colonel Wilkerson. As always, he is a fantastic guest. In fact, we had a damn good show today. Laith, Garland, Colonel Wilkerson. I appreciate all my guests. And whether I agree or disagree with my guests, I still appreciate them. There are some things I'm willing to have a fight over. There are other things that I'm less willing to have a fight over just because I may have a sense that they're wrong, but I can't, as a flat fact, I don't know that they're wrong. And there are other things you're put in this kind of weird spot where you're like, I vaguely agree with you, but I don't like the way it's being put, if that makes sense. It's complicated, but whether I agree with them or disagree with them, I appreciate all of them. And I want to give a shout out to each and every one of them for joining me today. We had a damn good show. We had a damn good, we had a damn good show. We had a damn good chat. Yeah. Let me go to chat before we close it. I think I might get some chats in today. Do weapons matter when there is no one to hold on to those weapons? That is a damn good question. That is a damn good question. Hey, we have 1 million guns and we have 5 people left to run with those million guns. I guess they would have infinite bullets, but 5 people shooting infinite bullets doesn't really get you that far, does it? Thank you for that. What is it? It be like that. It be like that. It be that way. You know, it's funny. I used to play chess at the barbershop. I grew up playing chess at the barbershop. After I learned how to play in 6th grade, and I remember going to the barbershop, and you know, you're a child, and you have these grown men, and you're like, "Oh, can I play the buzz?" This is for adults. It's like, go sit your ass over there. Or even worse, you can play the baby board. A guy comes in, rando guy comes in. He was supposed to be delivering something. And I'm sitting at the board, just messing around. He's like, "Hey, do you play?" I was like, "Sure." Now, keep in mind, I'm like, I don't know, 13, 14. He gets crushed. He gets crushed. And it is so humiliating because my barbershop, I don't know if you've ever been to a black barbershop. They talk shit like nobody's business. It is one of the greatest experiences of my life that I've been brought up at that barbershop playing chess. The shit that they talk is so over the top that it is the funniest thing in the world, especially if you're just watching. Even if you don't know what's going on the board, the stuff that they're saying to each other, it's just outlandish. And so at that point, they're laughing at the guy, right? They're ragging on him. They're just hilariously laughing at him. And at that point, they're like, okay, boo, because my mom called me boo. Okay, boo, we'll let you play. You can be at the board. You can be at the board. The speed and the pace at which I got good at that game was shocking to them. Shocking, utterly shocking. And I would be there till like 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night when they're closing. And my mom would be like, "Hey, is my child there?" It's like, "Yes, your child is here." Yeah. But one of the things that Butch used to say, Butch was one of the best players at the shop at the time before I got there. He would say, "It be that way sometimes. It be that way sometimes." It's like it builds character. But yeah, it be that way. It be like that. It be like that. M Sparks, 187 super sticker. M Sparks, shout out to you. Thank you for that, M Sparks. You have my thanks. You have my thanks. Yeah, you have my thanks. Let's see. Who else do we have? Cherie in the World Holy Family. Karl Marx explores the rise of communism as philosophical movement. Yes. The fascinating intellectual history is often overlooked by the Marxists who fail to connect, and the chat goes away at that point. Yeah, Marx doesn't quite tell you how to get there. It just gives you the theory, right? People figure it out as they go along. Laith made this point of saying, "Is China's a communist country?" Look, man, is France a socialist country? Well, they call themselves a socialist country. Macron is supposed to be a socialist, right? Despite the fact that Macron is a banker. I think China would say we are a communist country with Chinese characteristics, which makes a difference, right? Well-dressed nerd, Brave. Happy Friday. Happy Friday, Brave. Happy Friday, man. Thank God it is Friday. Thank you for that, Brave. Much appreciated. Art by Brave. See, I can't see the art, Brave. Let me see if I can see the art. I can't see the art. It says Art by Brave. You do artwork, Brave? I didn't realize you did artwork. But shout out to you, man. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. All right. Corruption trumps the government. Oh, I know what I was saying. Spades. Spades is another game I'm really good at. My natural partner in spades, a man named Jaleel Hood. We are legends. We are legends. We played that game at a level that was breathtaking. We were so good. We had like a psychic rapport with each other. I tell you this, we were playing in we went to Longwood University at one point, and they had a spades championship. They had 2 spades championships. They had the school spades championship, and they had the black spades championship. There's a difference in those things, right? The school spades championship is pretty much any random person at school. The black one is basically fraternities, like Q Dogs and all these other guys, and all of these other groups that just so happen to be African American. Which one do you think is the hardest in this batch? It's the black one. It's the black one. Jaleel and I dominated the school one. Like, we killed everybody in that school one. And there were games where we would, God, man, I don't know if you know how to play spades, but we would do, I remember there was one game where they had like 450. We were going to 500. They had 450. I think we had like 100. And we ended up, what is the thing where I haven't played spades in so long, where you bid a nil. So you're effectively saying, I'm not going to get any cards. My partner's going to get all the cards. And so immediately the game becomes, all right, we need that guy to get cards. Because if that guy gets cards, we win. Because we're gonna set him back further. And I used to be stoned a lot when I was in college. But I was still lucid, right? And I remember I would be mysterious to my partner, and it would freak him out. Like, because for me, it was like, okay, I've worked this shit out. Some of it is a pull, but sometimes it's like, I've got this worked out. And my partner's like, what the fuck is happening right now? And he finds out when the last card is effectively played. He's like, dude, stop doing that. Stop fucking me over like that. We killed it in the school one. In the black one, we get to the last, and by the way, this was not at like, you went to locations. So it would be like if you were in a video game, and in the game, you would go from location to location. So one time you're in a cafeteria, sometimes you're in somebody's dorm, sometimes you're at some random place, which gave it this kind of eerie, weird, surreal feel to it. We get to the Black Spades Championship. We dominate. And we get to the last game, the last team, and who's going to be decided to be number one. And we get to their room, and we lose that game, but we barely lose that game. But we won the original one. We were just phenomenal at spades. We were just something else. Just something else. By the way, from standpoint of just going back to the thing for the communist country thing. Look, people are going to get pissed off at me saying this. If you are looking at countries to extend themselves for the interests of another country, you will always be unsatisfied. You always have your feelings hurt, and you will always be upset. Whatever the idealism that was displayed in the context of the Soviet Union, Russia is not the Soviet Union. If you want to see idealism, look at Europe right now in regards to Ukraine, where they're burning down their economies. They're fucking over their population. And they're doing all of this under this idea of we're fighting for Ukraine. Well, really, they're just sticking it to the Russians, right? But under their mind and their model of things, let's take out the leadership, the cynical leadership for the moment. You just talk about random people with flag posts or flags on their shirts, lapels. That's idealism. That's not reality. That's idealism. Those are different things. The expectation that Russia and China or some of these other countries are going to say, we're going to take a risk. I don't see it. It's not about my wants. It's just, I don't think that's the way countries are built. At least not in these days. At least not these other powers. And if you are looking at the world from the Russian Chinese point of view, if you notice, Colonel Wilkerson and Laith agree. Kind of, even though I don't necessarily like the way, I disagree with the way Laith put it, but they're agreeing on the same sentiment. If you're Russia and China and you're looking at the world, and you're looking at the US, you're looking at the West, you've noticed a few things. Hey, the birth rate, they're dying sooner. Infant mortality is higher. They're $37 trillion in debt. They have just gotten beat back by Yemen in regards to military capacity. Iran beat the stuffing out of Israel. They are getting crushed and routed in Ukraine with military equipment that they've spent the last 20, 30 years building being utterly and completely destroyed and incapable, even as a united front, of taking down the Russian government. That looks bad. That looks very bad, right? So it's not just you're failing militarily in your objectives. You just got beaten in a trade war by China. All of these things are canaries in a coal mine. I've had a conversation with a friend of mine, and as I was pointing out to her, I was like, dude, the war is not the determining factor of the direction of the globe. It's not going to be these countries extending themselves for another country. It is going to be, from their point of view, the decline of the West. When the U.S. fails, Israel fails. Israel is not an independent actor, nor can it be an independent actor without the help of the United States. If the U.S. fails, all of these other projects fail. In their minds, from Chinese point of view, we're building more ships, we have high-speed rail, we're an industrial powerhouse, we have 3 times their population, we are doing poverty alleviation, we're doing et cetera, we have nukes, we can defend our territory. And I think the Russians are looking at it in a very similar sense, with the exception that they are actually in a hard war. I don't see them doing that. I just don't see them extending themselves in this way. Would I wanted them to use a veto? Yes, absolutely. Would I want them to be more assertive? Yes. But I'm not running the government. And their take on the world is going to be different by virtue of the distinction of where I am, where Laith is, or where they are sitting, and their responsibility. Their responsibility is the Chinese people. Their responsibility is the Russians. Period. You could ask, as Laith did, why do you accept, or why do you support, or why do people support one group or the other? Look, I don't work at Fault Lines, right? I do an independent channel. My take on the world has to do with sitting on the moon, looking at events. And you look at the world and you say to yourself, 1 million people just lost their life. For what? Because the United States wants geopolitical expansion. It's not an inherent Russia does anything and they have my agreement. It's not that. It's the United States is overreaching. That's my basis of operation, if that makes sense. That's my angle in the way that I'm looking at this. It's who is doing the killing, who is inspiring the killing. Will the killing be taking place if indeed a blank check wasn't given by us and our tax dollars to all of these rogue operations around the globe? If we weren't putting all of this money into media in order to change opinion, if we weren't knocking over governments, if we weren't doing these things, would these things be happening? The answer is no, it wouldn't. So my point of view is not like auto anything. It's not auto Chinese. It's not automatic Russian. It's not automatic add in rando country. It's who is fucking up. Who is the bad actor in this process? That is my job. That is my angle. I am probably the worst person in the world to work for a particular country or media outlet, because if that angle or that context changes, then my point of view changes. Gaza was probably a really good example. Me nearly getting fired on air because of how hard ass I was in regard to the Gaza issue. I say that to say, when I look at this stuff, I look at this stuff from the perspective of how do countries behave in general. I think countries behave like they're realists. You can say that's selfish. Okay. I mean, we can quibble over the word, but selfish, realists, that's an issue of perspective. That's like, freedom fighter or terrorist. Colonel Wilkerson, and the way that he's looking at it, I think is right. He's like, dude, they're killing himself. Why would you need to help your enemy at that point? Let him drown. If you're going to bog yourself down into a war in Iran, then yes, we're going to give Iran assistance, weapons, and everything else, because we want them on some level to be bogged down, and we want to bleed them dry in another type Vietnam situation. If they're going to do that in Venezuela, we will give them assistance, money, weapons, etc. We will bleed them dry, just like they tried to do us in Ukraine. If the empire falls, all of these other rogue regimes, all of the money that's going to media, Israel as a state, as an entity, all of these things also fundamentally collapse. So the fight from my point of view, it's not going to be over. Are we willing to go to nuclear war over Gaza? Or are we willing to go to nuclear war over Lebanon? Or are we willing to go to war over adding around a country? I don't think that's what a fight is being fought. I think the fight is more subtle. I think, yeah, you have the hard war that's taking place in Ukraine. You have the economic war that's taking place in the context of, let's say, like BRICS nations and this attempt at divvying up the globe into certain blocks. But the U.S. is overextended, it's bloated, and it doesn't quite seem to recognize limits. And anybody that has played chess, you need to have the material capability of sustaining the position that you're holding. And if you don't have the capability of sustaining that position, your position is going to collapse. We are watching a collapse. So, I don't know. We'll see. Oh, what is this? Plus, Russia is at war, not at war with Ukraine. Don't you understand that the United States is trying to overextend Russia? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. That's exactly what they're trying to do. But Russia's, again, it's not the Soviet Union. If you've noticed, they're pulling back on the amount of money they're spending on the military, meaning they apparently have already institutionalizing a kind of military industrial complex in and of itself, but they clearly know that that's the objective that the United States is trying to accomplish, right? So, again, from my point of view, Russia's chasing safety. They have accomplished their objectives in Ukraine. Ukraine didn't turn into a Vietnam type situation. Russia started off with a military of 150,000. That military is nearly 1 million men strong with 30,000, or 700,000, 800,000 strong with 30,000 coming in each month willingly, not being dragged off the street like dogs like they are in Ukraine. And their military proficiency is just astonishing, just professors of war at this point. Meaning, if the objective was to overextend Russia, obviously countries have limits because they're countries. Most countries have to pay attention to those limits. Putin has been a good manager of those limits. However, you take that for better or for worse, he's been a manager of those limits. I think we saw some of those limits in Syria, even though I know a Middle Eastern guest would disagree with me on that. Well, if man's going to kill himself, let him kill himself. I think that's the way they're looking at it. All right. Cells, you don't know what you're talking about. Psychoactive drugs that bring you further into consciousness unless you're drinking alcohol. Further into consciousness. Look, I'll tell you this. At this point, we're just talking, right? I always say the pot opens my heart center. And what I mean by that is I have had one shroom experience. Well, two, but one that worked. The other one didn't quite work. I just got lost. I was walking in Amsterdam and it was just fucking lost. But the other one, I remember sitting at home, trying the shrooms, and there was this, it's hard to explain. It was kind of like this overwhelming sense of compassion. And I remember I think I was talking to my mom at the time, and I was trying to communicate and not being able to do so. Like, look, if you've ever been out of body, or if you've ever been in a lucid dream state, in out of body states, in lucid dream states, there is, when you're meeting somebody else in those states, let's say somebody who's not you, there's a merger that can take place where you can merge yourself into this other being, person, entity, whatever it is. And there is this euphoric connection that takes place where it's hard to explain because it doesn't really apply physically. It's this it's a euphoria that takes place. And euphoria, I can't really put it into words. But there's also this sharing of of minds between people in a way that language just doesn't accomplish. And it was like this inability to communicate what you're feeling in a heart-centered way. Pot is on a low level of that with me. It depends on the situation. But that is not my normal operating procedure. That is not my normal operations. Yeah, it's just, well, euphoria is the right word. Yeah, it's euphoria. But that doesn't really mean anything, right? Like, it means something, but it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't, like, if you were a child and I say, yeah, the doctor's going to put an IV in you. And the child said, what's an IV? You said, well, that's a needle that they put into the skin. The child's like, ugh, I don't want that. And you try to explain to the kid what it feels like. You can never really explain that, right? Like, it's impossible to actually hit the thing. We're always stuck with using euphemisms in order to try to hit something. And the more euphemistic you get, the less accurate and precise you are. At the point where the person experiences it, they may say, oh, the euphemism was kind of right. But no, they understand it after the fact, after the experience. It's kind of like that, saying something like you're happy or euphoric. Somebody asked me the other day, was like, are you happy? And I had such a hard time answering that question. I was like, I'm content. It's like, what does that mean? I was like, I'm content. I'm not. Like, when I think of happy, I have certain thoughts in my head of what that means. When she thinks of happy, she may have different thoughts of what that means. How do you meld these things, like, in a way that makes sense to each other? It's always hard. It's always hard. I would say serenity more than euphoric. You can get euphoria from all kinds of drugs and acts. Oh, no. I've never had a drug that gave me euphoria in that sense. There are times where you are in a mood, right? And the fulfillment of that mood can feel euphoric. I hope that makes sense. Let's say, like, you are, I mean, this is very geeky, but fuck it, I'll go with it. You've finished all your responsibilities. You've done everything you're supposed to do. It's late at night. You can blast your music. You're playing chess. Nobody's bothering you. And you're singing at the top of your lungs while you're playing. And everything in you wants to do exactly that. Meaning, you want to be left to your own devices. Like, you don't want anybody fucking with you. You just want to be alone in isolation and just playing, music blaring, singing at the top of your lungs. And if you are buzzed, even better. That is happiness, right? That's a moment of joy. And people have whatever that is for them, because people have very different things that can end up bringing them joy. You can have some people's like running a marathon is joy. It's like, okay, all right, fair enough. Good for you. A spa day. It's nice. I'm going to call it joy, but it's nice. No, it just kind of depends on the person. And sometimes that stuff, at least for me, depends on mood and whether or not you're fulfilling the obligations of whatever that particular mood is. That's, it's like, are you running in a current? Can you tap into whatever the current that is? Yeah, I don't know. That's hard. Euphoria is, no, it's tough. They do much love baseball. Yeah, MMA is a euphoric drug. Really? Getting punched in the face. Getting punched in the face. It's like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. Oh, what is this? Paul McDonald. Well, shout out to you, Paul McDonald. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Look, by the way, if you haven't liked the show, like it, share it, subscribe to it. You can support it. PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, buy me a coffee. All of those things help support the content. I am in need of a producer. I want a producer. So, yes, as the show grows, I will finally get to the point where I can afford one, which is that I was a tomboy. I saw that. I was a tomboy. Oh, Cherie, that was you. Cherie. That's funny. Hi, Jamal. Let's start microdosing marijuana. You would likely be a high-profile political rapper producing historically mad flows, funky truth, inspiring people to take back their government. What? If Jamal started microdosing marijuana. Oh, microdosing. Honestly, at this point, I haven't touched pot in, what is going on, 8 months? The last time I touched pot was with my cousin. We were, he was giving me a send-off when he found out I was leaving. And he drove me to the airport. I think my mom was in the back seat. And he pulls out 2 joints that are just huge. And I'm like, all right. My first thought is, this is unsafe. We're driving in the car. And we are sitting there like, I am wasted going into the airport. That was my send-off. I mean, it wasn't, it felt great. It's like you're sitting there hanging out with your cousin and your mom, your family. No, that felt great. That was the last time I touched it. And it has been, 8 months? So microdose. I mean, microdose would just be a dose at this point. Everything's out my system. The jiu-jitsu buddy drained his ear once. Ugh. Oh, that's rough, Charles. I used to work with a guy that used to do MMA. He was a short, thick neck guy. When I was a software engineer at the company, the car company. And he used to have this cauliflower ear. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, this cauliflower ear. This because apparently when you're in MMA and your ear continues gets rubbed on the mat and stuff like that, his ears all fucked up. He had both of his ears have these huge cauliflower ears. Yeah, that's a buzzkill, man. That's a buzzkill. That is ugh. It's at least with chest, my dignity may be hurt at the end of it, but I walk out intact. Which reason I saw a lot. Sativa and indica. Yeah, I prefer sativa. I don't really do indica. Lymphatic. Yeah, that's disgusting. Pot. What else? I mean, what do you call it? Marijuana? Weed? I think weed is worse. It's mildly psychedelic. Yeah, it can be, especially if it's good. But again, I mean, it depends on the amount you use, right? There used to be people who used to go to the place and was I need 100 grams of edibles. And I remember one day the woman was like, dude, if you need that much, you need to cut back. And I remember my barber told me one day, he says, yeah, I smoked weed for 30 years and I'm not addicted. I was like, how do you know? You smoked weed for 30 years. It's just funny. Best to avoid fights with dudes with the cauliflower. Yeah, right. Yep. All things being equal, just try to avoid fights in general, from my point of view. But yeah. Yes, it's expensive, especially in the States. Because, in the States, when they legalize it, you can get it pretty much, God, man. I remember in DC legalized psychedelics and they legalized pot. And so they started having these pop-up houses where you could just go and buy pot. Once they legalize it, though, at that point, it's you get all fancy about it. It's hey, do you guys have Northern Lights? No, we don't have Northern Lights this week. Okay, but we have Thai Lights. Okay, well, let me get Thai Lights. Thai Lights is kind of like Northern Lights. Okay, I'll go with that. It's you get very snooty about it. It's ugh, I don't like the container that this is in. I like it when it's in a container. Yeah. Commodification of weed. But it's expensive. Yeah, it's expensive. Every so often we would have 4th of July sales. They may have Thanksgiving sales, Christmas sales, where you can kind of stock up. But yeah, it's expensive. It's very expensive. If it makes you sleepy. Well, sativa doesn't make you sleepy. Thai Lights is great. In fact, Thai Lights is probably the best that I've come across. $10 an ounce to produce? Really? It costs me $10 an ounce to produce iron glands. $10 an ounce? Really? Iron glands, I need to find where you are. I need to be where you are. Drugs are better than 70s. You think so? I don't know. Granted, I wouldn't know because I wasn't in the 70s. I was just a child. I was 3 years old or 7 years old. I certainly won't smoke weed at 7. No, I don't know. You would think that it's better now. Just from a technological standpoint, you get better at growing. You get better at destroying the amount of terpenes, the amount of cannabinoids, the amount of THC. Looks like you would just get better at building a better mousetrap over time. I don't know. Looks like we'll get stronger, not weaker. But I don't know. And we're talking about pot, so we have gone way off the rails. We've gone way off the rails. I've smoked pot for 30 years. I had to quit for 13 months. Court order. After 15, it was not better in any way. Hardest withdrawal was cigarettes in 25 years. Yeah, cigarettes, when I was in Portugal, I started smoking cigarettes, but that was because everybody smoked in Portugal. Like, they would have these things called pasteleiras, I think they were called them. And they were pretty much on every corner. And you wake up in the morning, you go to the pasteleria, get a ham and cheese sandwich, cappuccino, and you sit out there and drink and smoke. That's your morning. And in my case, it was like preparing for the show. And so, look, I would tell you, if I had to move anywhere in the globe, like if money was no issue, and you can move anywhere in the planet, Portugal was the place that I enjoyed the most. Everybody was chill, and it put me in mind, and they were too chill. For an American, they were way too chill. Because there were times like, let's say something goes wrong, and I'm not. It kind of depends on what goes wrong. If it's something that is in relation to me, where I'm like, hey, I need you to do this in relation to me. Okay, I could be assertive in that, because at that point you're ignoring my wants and my will in the context of something that's in relation to me. And I remember they were so chill. And I felt like how chill they were was amplifying how assertive I was being in that moment. It was just very strange. It's like, hey man, we were an empire. We're not an empire anymore. We just kind of accepted we're not an empire. So, we just sit here, we eat our fish, we drink our coffee, we smoke our cigarettes. We have a quiet life outside of the world's spotlight. That's what we are. And it's like, oh, that's great. That's great. That is fantastic. That is fantastic. Okay, I'm grabbing my first edible for today now. Thanks for the inspiration, Jamal. You're deep. Oh, that is funny. That is funny. I need to figure out what I'm going to do for Christmas, to be honest. I will give you a heads up. I'm probably not going to I'm going to take a break. I've been running full tilt for the past year. In fact, I think this may even be my anniversary. I think this might be my anniversary, or if not, close to it. Because what they fired us October 15th. I started the show back up in November. So yeah, it's about a year. I need to get the exact date for the anniversary show. But it's been about a year. No vacations, no breaks. I might have taken a day or here or there, but when I was working at the radio station, I would take like 17 days off. And that would be my summer vacation. Not so much on this show, or not so much now. But I'm not going to be working for Thanksgiving, so I'll give it a heads up now. I don't know about Black Friday. I may take that day also. And I'm thinking about taking several days for Christmas, because I got to be honest, I don't know how many people would do the show anyway on Christmas or during the Christmas break. They'd be like, dude, are you serious? It's holidays. So I don't know. That's a hit to income, though, when you do it that way. But we'll see. But I don't think go home and visit. Dude, that is a 40-hour flight from where I am. It's like a 40-hour flight. That is a 40-hour flight. I don't think you realize how far I am from home. Yeah, I don't think you realize how far I am from home. And it breaks my model. It breaks my model. Keep in mind, the entire point of this trip was to save cash. Orthodox Christmas or Coca-Cola Christmas. Coca-Cola Christmas. Yeah, Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola. Ham, turkey, chicken wings, collards, candy yam. Oh, Jesus. Just the amount of food. Yeah. Coca-Cola Christmas. No, I don't enjoy flying. It's just a fact of life, getting from point A to point B. I don't mind, like, it's just necessary. There's no way around it. If I could take a train, I would take a train. But it can't be ridiculous. Like, there's a bus going from here to India that is a 28-hour bus trip. And it's like, what the fuck? 28 hours on a bus. That is rough. 28 hours on a bus is rough. So that would be a no. So that would be a flight if that had to take place. But no, keep in mind, the point was to save cash. And so in order to make that work, you have to stick with the model. And the model is you have to stay in a place for 2 to 3 months, because every time you make a jump, you're expending cash, and that cash needs to be bled out over the course of those 2 to 3 months. And then you take another baby hop. You need to keep the hop short so the costs won't be expensive or exorbitant. And you hop your way as you go. I need to figure out where I'm going next, which I'm unclear on. I was thinking about Azerbaijan. I was thinking about India, even though I don't want to go to India. I didn't like India, if I'm being honest. No shade to anybody here from India, but I hated India. But the treatments are inexpensive. And if you stay for 2 to 3 months, you can effectively save cash for the 2 to 3 months that you stay before jumping to your next location. But again, that puts me all the way out to March. So I don't know. Yeah, Sugon, I wasn't a big fan of India. I was not a big fan of India. Go to Fiji. Fiji is probably going to be expensive. And by the way, keep in mind, anywhere you go, have to get treatments. So there's a cost. So Thailand, I tried Thailand. The issue for Thailand was treatments. So because Thailand was going to be one of the locations I was going to go to. I was in, Malaysia, Jakarta. Bangkok would have been a great location to jump into because the Bangkok airport is huge. And so flights out of Bangkok airport were much cheaper. Problem that I ran into was Bangkok required a doctor in advance in order to get treatments. Now, you can do the thing of showing up at a hospital saying, hey, I need to get a treatment for X or Y. Oh, that's a fucking risk. I mean, that worked in Vietnam only because I fucked up in Vietnam. When I first went to Vietnam, I booked a facility, but that facility was in Hanoi, whereas I was in Saigon. And yes, everybody calls it Saigon. I heard you, man. But at that point, the only thing I could do is just show up at a hospital. And the hospital put me in contact with one of the public hospitals that was in the area, which was fantastic. I saved, $30-$40 treatment. The people were nice. I had no issues. It was good. It was good. The public hospital in Kathmandu was complicated. I say complicated. They did stuff that, oh God, man, it grated. The people were very nice. The nurses were very nice. Assertive at times, but more in a mama type way. Like I seemed to be an anomaly that I was there, so there was that. So there was interest in that sense. But when you are trained, as I was, to do treatments, because I used to do them at home, and so self-cannulation, setting up machines, all of that stuff. And you're trained with certain practices that you do and things that you don't do. And this has been something that you've been involved in for 30 years, 31 years. And you're watching and you're like, whoa, that doesn't seem safe. That seems fucking unsafe. Oh, it's a moot point. I ended up moving to another location. That location has been fantastic. Yeah, the kitchen has been really good. Not to mention the nurses are so attractive at the other location. There's one woman, I think I call her Sexy Beak. And it's not a beak. Beak is the wrong word. That sounds bad. Very attractive. Very attractive. And just knows this just works for her. It just works. It's like, God, that's a sexy beak you got there. But no, the people have been nice. The facility is great. It's getting cold here, which is a little bit weird. Somebody say, "How dare you?" What? How dare you? Oh my God, Jesus is potty mouth. Oh, okay. Okay. I thought somebody say, "How dare you?" I'm giving a compliment. That's not a negative. She's awesome. She's very cool. No, Kathmandu has been fine. This has been a more difficult part of leg of my trip. I put it that way. And it's only because of my own sensibilities. Like every random blue moon, I will see a foreigner here. Many of them are held up in like the Radisson or somewhere like that. There's a Radisson hotel somewhere nearby. And I didn't even know it was there until I went looking for pizza. And there was supposed to be a pizza restaurant in the area. Kathmandu is constructed in a strange way for Americans. Many of the streets are very narrow. Many of them don't have sidewalks. Even though it's a walking city or walking country. And so many of the locations you get to, you may just walk, or you may just take a motorcycle, rent a motorcycle to get from point A to point B. But it is, the people are very nice. But it is, let's say, graded on my sensibilities. I'll put it that way. I just said that way. You're wandering earth. Yeah, wandering earth like Cain. Yeah. But so far, so good. I'm considering going to the mountains, Pokhara. But yeah, I need to figure out where I'm going. I'm leaving here December 23rd. Either way, I just need to figure out the next location. At some point, I will make my way to Africa. And even that one, it's like, okay, where? It's like out there chasing the giraffe and bears. But that's not going to be for a few months because, again, you have to work your way. If I do Azerbaijan, I considered going to Lebanon to visit Laith. I considered that. I would love to go to Iran to meet Morandi. That would be cool. Getting to Iran is a pain in the ass, so that's probably not going to happen. Lebanon, as an American, you can get in for a month or so that's not all that difficult. Yeah, it would be cool to meet Laith. And it would be cool, not to mention, there's a few people in Lebanon. Laith, Marwa, Vanessa, I'm trying to think who else. The other woman that I talked to that was a Christian. At the very least, there are people that you know in locations. From Lebanon, you can jump into Europe. Yeah, I need to work it out. Yeah, it's getting cold here. It's wild, right? Because in Malaysia and in Jakarta, it was 90 degrees every day. If the temperature hit 85 degrees, it was a chilly day. And you get used to that. Like your body gets used to it. Like, yeah, you get used to it. You at a certain point you enjoy it. Like you just sit there and sweat, or it's easy to keep your body temperature and stuff like that. You may cut the AC on every so often, but for the most part, if the room is comfortable, especially if you have a good wind blowing, you don't need it. And then you jump here and the temperature drops and you're like, fuck, it's cold. It's cold. It's goddamn cold here. Yeah. I consider going back to Malaysia, actually, at the end of all of this. Malaysia was nice. It wasn't bad. But it's very Americanized. It's very strange. Like when you're in Jakarta, like for example, I give you an example. I haven't seen American fast food places here in Kathmandu. I've seen a KFC, but I don't think it's open. Not saying that they're not here. I just haven't seen them. And so for the most part, I've made groceries, and I've just ate based on groceries. It's cheaper anyway. Usually it's cheaper unless you're going to an international store. The same thing was true for Jakarta. Yes, they had a McDonald's. Yes, they had those things, but Jakarta's food is good, right? Like the seafood and everything else is just on point. So you don't really need to do fast food in that case. And so what you see is in Kathmandu, many of the people are thin. In fact, most of the people you come across 70, 80% are relatively thin and short. That's not true in Malaysia. There's some healthy people in Malaysia. That's some very, very healthy people in Malaysia. Very girthy, healthy people in Malaysia. It's different. Yeah, it's different. It's wild. All right. I am going to end this because we're just talking shit at this point. You never read anything, son. What do you mean? I read chats. Clans of Alpha. What? Jesus did not have blue eyes and blonde hair. No, he did not. Which Bible do you use? I've never heard. I've only seen the blue-eyed Jesus at church. In the context of the Bible, no. Especially in the area. Payne said whoever was the prophet was black is killed. The prophet was not black. Oh, Jesus Christ. You guys are having a Jesus argument. You're having a Jesus off. Burkina Faso. I've never been. And I would, my itinerary is not planned in advance. If I'm in the area, I may go. But we'll see. We'll see. We will see. We will see. India looks great. It depends on where you are. Look, all I'm saying is rubbing against my sensibilities. I would go to Nepal or Tibet before India. Well, I'm in Nepal currently. I went bungee jumping near Tibet, but that was like 18 years ago. All right. All right. I am going to say, like, if you're going to go to Lebanon, go fast before it becomes part of Israel. Oh, don't tell me that. Don't say that. I have friends in Lebanon that I want to be safe, and it fucks with me. Carl Jung, Alan Watts. Alan Watts has a great voice. Like, if you listen to some of the things, yeah, he has a great voice. Some of the shit Carl Jung said is pretty intense also. Kenya. I've been to Kenya. Kenya was nice. Kenya was nice. Have you done blood plant from a healthy individual? What? Blood plant? Research old rats receiving young blood. No, I have not. I have not. Who was that guy, that Soviet theoretician that was giving himself blood transfusions from younger people? He ends up catching the disease and dying from it. I can't think of his name. He wrote this book. Was it Red Sun? Red something. It was about creating like communism on Mars or something like that. And keep in mind, they wrote this before, like immediately like after the revolution, as they were building communism, and this was this vision of it or something. Dracula. I've been to Romania, and I've been to the castle, Dracula's castle. It's so tiny. Like, it looks huge, like on video, like pictures, and you can think like, oh, it's so adorable. It's so adorable. It's like a little adorable castle. Yes, it's the only country that 40% of the population that's obese, or let's say fat. I would like to use the term girthy. I would use the term girthy. They're very girthy. Yeah, they're very girthy. Transylvania, yes, Transylvania. Yeah, they're very girthy. A Frankfurter. You know, it's funny, and I interpret these places through food. That's what makes it so bad. I have a friend of mine who's in Brazil right now. And I'm like, oh, dude, enjoy. The food is so good. I've been all over Europe. Yeah, there have been places in Europe I haven't been. I haven't been to... Yeah, I can't think off the top of my head. But I think there's been a few places. Yeah, Vlad and Paula. Honest, that castle, that shit is intense. That shit is intense. Because once you're there, you get to see like some of the stuff that they were doing and the torture mechanisms that they were having at the castle. Oh, it's so intense. Like, the idea you do that to a person is just fucking outrageous. Like, as angry as I may be at a person, it would never occur to me to put that person in a device, like an iron casket of sorts, and then heat it up to burn the person alive, or to impale them in spikes in just the right way to ensure that the person stays alive for the longest amount of time as they're impaled on a spike. And you think to yourself, so you had people studying how to do this shit? Oh, that's so grotesque. Just completely grotesque. Yeah, it's very touristy. Yeah, it's very touristy. But it's something to see, right? It's like you're in the area. It's freezing. Had good company at the time. But yeah, we had a good time. We had a very good time. All right. I keep saying call this a day. I'm going to say like. I'm going to say share. I'm going to say subscribe. You guys are fantastic. Oh, don't be like that Justice Flame calling people losers. Don't be that. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. Don't be like that. You all be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind, even though that's not what's taking place in the chat right now. And I will see you guys bright and early. Wait a minute, what's today? Today's the 21st. Thanksgiving is the next Thursday. It's next Thursday. Okay. You guys be safe, be kind to the degree that you can be kind. And I will see you bright and early Monday morning. You guys have a fantastic weekend. Be safe all.